You got to keep trying.
I have. That's why the DM history is hilarious.
Hey, a relentless advocate. You got nothing to lose. And
exactly. Well, there was a phase where we were drinking Macallan like every episode.
Yeah, you're bull market. The Macallan 15 will come out.
the everybody's rich bull market sipping Macallan every podcast phase.
No, I've got that too. There's a few people I want to get on TFTC that the DMs are just so one-sided that I go in there to add DM to it. I'm like, oh, I'm such a fucking loser. We ninja launched it. We got a party rep RHR this week.
Oh, we're live.
We're live.
We're live.
We've been live. We're joined.
Have we been live this whole time?
Oh shit!
Not the whole. It was since the Macallan talk.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we've got
Macallan. If you're listening, come join the podcast.
Yeah, come become a sponsor. And disclaimer: we're sitting down with Adam O and Jevi, who work at Upstream Data and Unchained Capital, which are both sponsors of the show. But we're also good friends. Jevi's a week in, week out.
Jevi's a ride or
Live
die
chatter.
freak.
Ride or die.
What's it feel like to be on the other side of the chat?
Weird.
But
good.
We roped Jevi and he was walking out of the lobby.
Yeah, where were you going?
I was going back to the hotel. I was going to freshen up and finish up a couple other pieces that I needed to do before dinner tonight. And
we roped him in. We told him he had to join us.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I mean, this is. I haven't been here yet. I mean, I've been to this building one time, but I hadn't seen the studio yet, and this place is awesome. So
I gotta give a big shout out to Kaylee. She spruced up the studio while we're going. Again, I'm going to point to a wall that nobody can see, but we got some nice lights here.
Point to it?
Yes, let's all point to the wall, and then we got this nice green wall now.
Great.
It's not white anymore. It's a nice, comforting green color.
Trying to will the bull market back into existence.
Yes,
with greenbacks.
Yeah, with green backgrounds. You know, you're just gonna incept it, like dump your greenbacks for Bitcoin. We don't even have a list this week. We're just gonna shoot the shit. Adam, thank you for being flexible.
Oh yeah, I came down to Austin really to, I think what do they call it, LobbyCon, when you don't even go to the conference, you're just there to hang out with all the people at the conference. That's kind of what I'm doing here in Austin. Also got, at Upstream we've got plenty of customers and potential customers here in Texas, and so while I'm down here, I'm always reaching out to them, see if anybody wants to get lunch, see if they want to scale up their Bitcoin mines in the oil field. Which guys are building during the bear market. I mean, they like. Keep in mind in the oil field, I'm sure right? A lot of this is nobody's really using Bitcoin as the denominator, right? Certainly not in upstream oil and gas for, by any large stretch. So in dollar denominated terms, all of the infrastructure, while the turnaround might be a little bit iffy because of supply chains and inflation's been insane, ASICs have deflated a ton. And so
cheap as fuck.
Cheap as fuck is what
if
ASICs
dollar
are right
is
now.
The unit of
if
account.
Dollar is the unit account. If Bitcoin's unit of account, I could talk for like 4 hours on that, but it's good. It's fun times. Like this is where the bear market, the same way with even being at a conference or being at a meetup, when prices crashed, what do we have, like 70%? We've seen a 70% drawdown. When people are still showing up to build companies around this thing. I mean, at Upstream Data, we fabricate buildings and build engines for this
Chevys, baby.
Open source project.
Mining with Chevys.
Mining with Chevys,
you
mining
guys
with Doosands.
You got to lean into the Chevy meme. Mining Bitcoin with Chevy.
It's such a fucking meme. The bear markets are for builders, but it is true.
It is, right? And I mean, it's almost becomes annoying in the bull, because in the bull market, like when you see everybody and stuff, like everybody's so.
Is this your second bear market?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I was born in the bear market, right? I came back in right as Bitcoin was passing 10 after it had touched like 20, right? So, and I never knew it at 20. Like I was never looking at the price at 20,000. It wasn't even on my radar.
Wasn't there for too long.
Yeah, it was only like a couple of weeks.
It never actually hit 20.
No, it was like a couple of minutes.
Like a day, right?
Yeah, it was like a day. Like a couple guys got to sell some coins above 19.
Charlie Lee.
No, don't forget about the people. A couple of people got to buy that too.
Century.
Charlie Lee just dumped on all the Litecoin holders.
But that's to remain impartial.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. In order to remain impartial to the project.
He was gracious.
Yes.
Very gracious.
But, so I was born in it. Like, I was one of those things where I was getting excited about Bitcoin. I was that guy that was like, but when you're excited about it, you want to share that and like bounce these ideas, because otherwise you're just a sounding board. And then, I'm telling all my family about it. I'm putting like, my paycheck into Bitcoin, and it's just going from like 10 to 8 to 6 to, and then it just sits at 6, and like it's like, oh my gosh, maybe 6 is this floor because it seemed really solid or whatever, and then boom, we just fucking fell to 3, and we fell to 3. It's like you're chopped in half at least, if not by 2/3, and
for upstream at the same time, oil went negative.
Yeah, oil's going negative. In 2018, but I was so passionate because I was working in the oil and gas industry, right? I wasn't at Upstream Data yet. This was still all a fantasy to me. Like the idea of mining Bitcoin on flare gas was still something like I had thought about, but didn't know it was in practice or anything. And that I was still just getting more passionate every day, right? And thank God Bitcoin was cheap, and thank God I viewed it that way. I wasn't, trading for more money at the end of the week, because I sure as shit didn't have more money at the end of the week. I kept, you ever have that where like you keep putting more money into your investment account and like the total amount of your investment account just stays the same, kind of a thing? Like it was one of those where you're getting crushed, but your time preference is lowered because you're interested by something, right? Bitcoin's that carrot to get you there, to like fight through it, I guess.
Yeah. And this is turning out to be another grueling bear market too, like hovering down at 21,000. The price isn't on the block clock right now, but
I mean, it's still 21,000.
That's the thing. Matt and I were talking about it earlier. Like what, I'm very interested, since we don't have a list, what I wanted to focus on is like the overarching macro backdrop, particularly like the energy crisis and the effect that's having on Europe's economy, supply chains. We have $10 MCF gas here. At least it hit that this week. I'm not sure if it's still there right now.
Unreal.
Yeah. And like, what does that mean for Bitcoin? Like, I wrote about it last week or 2 weeks ago. I wrote about it earlier this week. Like the energy situation in Europe, it is pretty astonishing that it's not being covered as much in the mainstream, because it is such a dire situation that they're in right now. I mean, you have like something like $760 a megawatt hour in Germany right now. We're not even in winter. It doesn't seem to be any solution to fix the supply side of things over there. They're actually worsening it because they're still going to wind down those nuclear power plants.
And totally oblivious to it too, it seems. Like I was just in Scandinavia for 3 weeks almost, and like conversations that I would have, nobody's paying attention to electricity.
Really? What'd you see out there?
Just business as usual. People are still going out. Like it's not as though anybody's curtailing their electricity use around town. Nothing seems out of the ordinary.
So they can afford it, or the bills.
Either they can afford it, or it's just like it hasn't come yet, right?
Yeah. And I think it's starting to come in certain places. That's one of those things. I talked about it as well. Like, back in December, I remember when this Ukraine-Russia thing had just kind of started, happening, right? And it's as plain as day. Everybody knows that Europe is completely dependent upon Russian hydrocarbons, right? If anybody that takes 20 minutes to kind of investigate figures out where does, Europe's energy come from, certainly Germany's, Russia. And so it's in Putin's best interest, right? It's in Russia's best interest to prolong this. And I bet you when they picked, the date to invade, it was tactical, right? Like, and there's something to do with, when it's really cold, when it's Russian winter and Ukrainian winter, the ground's hard enough that they can drive their vehicles right through anything, right? And currently they get bogged down. And so wintertime is like when they, we bring the heat and win the war kind of a thing, because we're economically pressuring them the most. People will literally die in Europe, right? That's like when power gets to $1 per kilowatt hour, people, they'll turn on their heat, but the producers of energy will shut it off to people, right? And people will be left to freeze. They'll burn their couches.
Well, we already saw this earlier this year in the UK when it first popped off. The utilities couldn't even buy the natural gas from the midstream providers because it was too expensive.
Oh yeah, I was on the phone with a customer like 2 days ago, and he's just telling me about, we're going back and forth. He's telling me about all the crazy things he's seeing with prices. He's telling me that LNGs, right, that are so in such high demand right now, not just to Europe but to South Korea as well. But the thing about South Korea, the Koreans, they have incredible infrastructure to process and store LNG, right? They have decades of facilities that they built up. Europe has none of that. So the Europeans are paying to have these massive barges just sit in the harbor full of LNG because they have nowhere to store it. So they're just keeping the boat there. Yeah. And so then supply chains are getting screwed up, because there's no boats available because they're just keeping them in the harbor so they can't ship more LNG. It's an absolute, it's disequilibrium is what we're finding. It's because government intervention has they've bastardized energy.
Well, and it's
production. It's ruined it.
like massive disincentivization of building out any infrastructure related to any of these legacy fuel solutions under the guise of, we know that we don't want to use these anymore. We want to switch to clean, renewable energy sources. So that's where we're going to focus all our energy. And like, you could see all these massive wind farms out in the sea between Denmark and Sweden, and like most of them are standing still on a windy day. Like, they're not even utilizing the resources that they have at hand. And yet, you know, when it comes to investing in infrastructure to be able to manage some of these supply shocks that they're inevitably going to go through, they're totally caught with their pants down.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens when that floor kind of gets raised? Because I think it's going to happen globally, right? I think when the cost of a kilowatt hour globally, right, the average cost of a kilowatt hour globally has gone up so high, you know, that all bleeds downstream, right? That's massive kind of, I would say, cause of not the cause, but a massive, you know, first indicator of inflation.
The front of the cost increases.
Yeah,
that's where it's going to happen.
Yeah, kind of the front of the train, if you will, on that process. And so, you know, I think at some point, as this bleeds downstream, there's going to be consumer shock. That's the whole idea. There'll be curtailment from price inflation, right? When gas is $25 a gallon, nobody's going to buy it, or they're going to drive less and minimize their driving. I think that there's also a consideration on the Bitcoin mining side of things, where I think the floor of like, what is cheap energy? You know, I've written about this a little bit, but you know, cheap energy maybe 3 years ago was like 2-cent energy. Like I have like nearly kind of that kind of energy if you're, you know, in a flare gas situation where you're mitigating a liability. It's not hard. It's very hard to find, and it typically can't find it at super massive scale. 2 cent now is almost like non-existent. It's like 4-cent energy is cheap right now. Like
yeah.
That's at scale energy.
Wait, you just said $25 a gallon for gas?
Oh, I think we could get up to $15.
When?
I mean, and where? Here in Texas? Certainly, if you're out in Midland, it's probably not going to get that high. Certainly not first. But like California,
well, California's just,
I'd say, you know,
they already hit like 9.
It could happen before, you know, or certainly before like the end of Q1 2023. But because what you have to realize right now, and you could talk to those who are even, you know, much more specialized in the oil field than I am. Like Ryan Leachman's a great person to talk to on this. We can't produce more oil in the United States right now in short notice.
You can't get a drilling team.
Exactly. They don't have the casing tubes, right? They don't have the drilling team. They don't have the rigs. And everything's backlogged. Like, even if you could throw all the money in the world at it, right? With something as powerful as the money printer, you cannot fix this problem in the short term. We can increase output a little bit, right? Natural gas is more flexible than crude, where we can put out a lot of power with natural gas. But it does not solve a, you know, runaway price problem. And I don't think, because this floor has raised, same thing with, you know, my point on Bitcoin mining, like, what is cheap energy? You know, just that microeconomic framework of every individual, you know, what do they view as expensive, and what will they tolerate, and what will they start to scream about? I don't think people are screaming until it's like $17 in certain places, because then they're like, my God, right? But like 9, I don't think people aren't even posting on Twitter hardly about 9. Like,
well, I mean, I haven't seen 9 yet.
It happened in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, I think it even touched 10 in like certain, like, I think Northern California
in like
towns
Tennessee, it's like 4, low 4s or something.
It was great to come back. I've been in Jersey.
It's come down too the last 60 days.
Yeah.
And there's been some subsidization and help there, and a lot of fuel reserves bled. Like, we bled a lot of strategic oil reserves.
Right.
And so,
because we had them all filled up during the negative times.
Right, but we can't bleed oil reserves, you know, through December.
Right, the reserves, they're finite.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I think, I mean, which is interesting, is like the reserves aren't supposed to be used for, like, you know, to help your political viewpoints. You know what I mean? Like, it's supposed to be used like wartime reserves. And shit. Yeah. Like, you know, but
let's lower the price of the pump by 50 cents or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So these midterms aren't so, you know,
but that's like, it's crazy how short-sighted that is, though, because it's just going to slingshot right back up.
It's the fiat system. It incentivizes waste, incentivizes that high time preference.
Well, based on the scenario that we're seeing unfold, the prices at the pump weren't even as high as they probably should have been, and then you still have the administration saying, you know, gas station owners, bring down the price at the pump. You're ripping people off. It's like, are you kidding me? These people have the smallest margins of anyone.
Yeah, the retail gasoline
It's
distributor,
crazy.
he makes money when you go in there and buy Twinkies.
Right.
Like he does not, and lottery scratch tickets and stuff. He's not making money on
To the point where they all like put ads now. Like you have to watch like fucking ads while
Yeah.
you're pumping your gas.
Yeah.
That's true, and you can't even turn them off or anything. I hate that.
No.
But no, I will say they're the oil and gas companies are doing well. I mean, they're positioned in much like Bitcoin miners. They're producing a commodity,
Right.
which the price has gone up. But guess what? All of their costs have at least doubled.
And people need their resource.
Right, so-
right?
Yeah.
It's simple.
Everyone-
Well, like going back to your
Everyone
point, like this SPR release, lowering the price of gasoline at the pump by 50 cents to $1 maybe, but it sends an incorrect market signal where we really should be replenishing supply, but releasing those reserves has artificially lowered the price temporarily, and so you're not really sending the correct pricing mechanism to go get more supply.
Right.
But
I also
sort of-
noticed there was a massive price discrepancy on the way coming back down. Normally, like I went up to a lake house about an hour outside of the Twin Cities, and usually the discrepancy in price between in town and outside of town is maybe like 15 cents or something. It was more than $1.
holy shit.
And that was kind of during that period where it was coming back down. And so you leave open, when you artificially try and move that price point, it leaves open the door for some of these local gas stations to decide, well, people are still thinking that that's the price. I'm going to leave it up and I'm going to bring it down slower because, slowly people start to pick up on it. There's arbitrage, but that information doesn't filter down as quickly. So I don't know how you resolve that.
I mean, so when
You
we're
produce more oil.
yeah, when we're thinking about it, like in a pure free market, what would happen is the price of energy would go up, and it would provide an opportunity for people to invest and make money off of that increase in price, right? But that's not what we're seeing here.
No.
Well, we're seeing it capped off, right? And it's because there was a deterioration of capacity, right? Because at any given moment, the United States, the oil and gas upstream production side of the industry has a capacity, right? It's a finite capacity. It's like, well, even if everyone was motivated to go spend all the dollars they have in their bank right now to try to produce more oil, how much oil could we maximum, what's the maximum amount we could be producing at any given moment? There's a number there. And when you degrade the industry, when you knock the entire industry down even equally, right? If you shrink that industry to a point where then ultimately you can't justify any more growth, and you depend on foreign import oil, well, now you're in a place where literally growth is impossible, right? Like absolute meeting that potential local demand, right? Requires that you go outside of your own country and deal with trade, deal with the counterparty, which invites the issues of like, oh well, those costs are going to bleed over from this Russia-Ukraine conflict, and so now you have to participate in this inflated industry where you could have been somewhat insulated and then started exporting and taking advantage of this, type of a market situation. You could have been the arbiter, but instead you got arbitrage, and you got seen as ultimately the bottom of the totem when it came to grabbing value.
You got. You
got got.
You reminded me of something I wanted to say earlier, which is like the sanctions against Russia are so short-sighted because United States and Europe, essentially, the G7 countries, essentially thought they'd be able to like starve Russia of customers because they're like, oh, like we're your biggest customers. But in the meantime, they've gone to Iran, India, China, other countries, and they've found new customers rather quickly. And so that sanction, which they thought was going to be potent, is,
At a higher price point too.
yeah, and it's proving to be completely impotent. And now, like you find the Western governments are stuck in this sunk cost fallacy where they're like doubling, tripling down, and just looking at a steamrolling train coming right at them and refusing to admit the reality of the situation, actually make the right decisions that are going to prevent deaths this winter, like you described earlier.
Yeah, and you've got at the same time, you've got years of uncertainty related to what the government is going to decide to do in terms of fossil fuel industry, and as a result, you have an investment paralysis where the industry doesn't want to invest in things that they may or may not be able to pursue 12 months into the investment going live. There's permits that are being blocked, and so there's this headwind that's being put on the system. And then when all of a sudden supply needs to be increased and you've stifled any opportunity for an increase in supply, you're somehow surprised that the prices are going to go up?
Well, and that's a great point. So like it's happening right now in Colorado, right? Adams County, one of Upstream Data's customers, they got sued by the county economic, head of economic development or something. I think it's like a county commissioner position or some sort. Sued by the county because mining Bitcoin in the oil field is not a defined use case.
Yeah.
Right. Quote unquote defined use case. Right. It's like, what do you mean? Generating power in the oil field has always been a defined use case. So that's always happened. Now we run the power into some computers and all of a sudden that's undefined. Right. And really ultimately what it is, it's the state, which is crazy at the county level stepping in to get its cut. It's like, well, these guys are making that. Well, what ended up happening was they had to shut the wells in because they can't flare there. Right. And the reason that they're mining so they don't have a market for the gas. And so now that they can't, mitigate this gas economically, they have to shut the well. Well, guess what the well was doing? It was producing oil, right? It's like we're in the midst of an oil shortage and you're shutting people down. You're suing them for what? Mitigating their emissions, being more efficient? Or is it just because you've written a tax code for this thing yet? You would rather there be short-term pain and massive dead weight loss than to actually make the right decision, right? And now, is that in the best interest of the county? I mean, in some asinine world, I'm sure they're going to justify it somehow. Or certainly not the people of the county, right? Because what's best for the people of the county is, I guarantee you they're going to say gas prices are top 5 on the list.
They certainly believe
right
that they're doing what is in the best interest of the county.
Oh, I mean, no way. They're doing what's best interest of their, county revenue tax dollars, right? And if they're a good politician, they're looking to decrease the tax dollars.
Well, is that even the case, though? Because you can make the argument that the tax revenue from the oil sales alone would...
Well, no, exactly. Absolutely. Now, that being said, I mean, there's still potential there, right? So, it's not like the oil's gone and it's not wasted or anything. So that you shut in the well or plug the well, and you could produce it later. But you're right. There's an opportunity cost. And economists would say absolutely, there's massive opportunity costs in not letting that go. An accountant might say meh, right? So it kind of depends where you're coming from. But what's gonna be really fun to start to see, and it sucks because we don't get to see it right now because Bitcoin took a massive dive, right? Took a massive shit, and oil and gas, like you said, natural gas is and I don't expect very many people would know this, but natural gas I think is at a 15 or an 18-year high right now. So what $9 an MCF, $10 an MCF means is it's something the oil and gas industry and producers only would dream about. They never actually thought would happen. And so we're in the midst of this place right now where mining Bitcoin in the oil field with the absolute latest and greatest miners might yield you $11 an MCF. And if you're selling to the pipeline, you might be getting 8 to 10. So mining Bitcoin is not, we found an arbitrage where it's wow, these markets have leveled off, where whether I send my gas to Bitcoin or to the midstream, I'm more or less getting the same kind of a return. Oil and gas producers are much more familiar with pipelines and midstream. So a lot of them are opting to,
right. There's not a strong incentive to go to something new.
Well, exactly. Because what they see is an increased in perceived risk, right? From the unfamiliarity, right? From the fact that this is new, Bitcoin could go to zero tomorrow.
I mean, that's usually a safe assumption, right? It's if you don't understand something, don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and you've been waiting your whole life for gas
for a $10 MCF. This is it. And you've got a gas pad with 10 proven wells, and I mean, this is the time either to go sell the operation and make that because you made a bet. You bought a bunch of wells when they were cheap, and you sold when it was really expensive. So and then somebody's going to come in and they're going to risk capital to make a midstream because they're going to make that deal. And the oil and gas industry is a really great case study of what kind of free market competition with a commodity can be if you go to the small scale, right? When you start including those massive names out there, the ones that are building wind projects, offshore wind projects. I mean, would you ever buy a stock of an oil and gas company that was building offshore wind? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Matt's dad would.
Wait, is Exxon doing that now?
They're getting
I think
in the
they
green
all
energy.
are. I think all the big, ones are because
my dad's a big ExxonMobil bull, OG ExxonMobil bull.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Dude, he got a whole bunch of stocks
he just owns stock. He's
exactly.
not he's not on the board or something.
No, it beat the dollar, right?
But when I grew up, we were only allowed to buy gas at the Exxon stations.
No way.
No way.
So he was actually prejudiced. He was prejudiced.
Super
to his gas.
diehard. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Do not go to the
I'm
Shell.
familiar with such a situation. But to your point earlier, right? You talked about the I guess legacy infrastructure, right? Which would be, if we're going to be frank, right, like the coal fire plants, the cogen plants, and oil refineries, things like that. One of the things, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen me. I've been screaming about this on Twitter, but one of the starkest examples of this is this new thing. And when I say new, it was not even an industry 5 years ago. It wasn't even an industry. Is this new net zero biomass fuel, right? Where you
Burning trees, right?
yeah, it's deforesting.
Dude, because you shared that Vimeo.
Right, that's where I saw it.
Yeah,
I
we
saw
both
it
watched
on-
it after you shared that. Explain that.
Yeah, so the documentary is, you should go check it out. I think it's called Burned, Are Trees the New Coal? I think is like the subtitle. So like, and it's on their, it's like a really low budget documentary. I think it's like a team of environmentalists. This documentary walks through and highlights how in the last 5 years, because of legislation, this massive industry's popped up in the southeastern part of the United States.
But it's legislation in Europe, correct?
Well, both in Europe and in the United States, right? And so there's a carbon accounting loophole that kind of takes place. But two, what's occurring is a massive boom of logging industry, deforesting and logging industry in the southeastern part of the United States within 100 miles of the coast. And the reason it's within 100 miles of the coast is to bring it to port, right? Is so that they can export this wood and
They export it as like wood chips, right?
yeah, I was gonna say they don't export it as
Like
timber.
pellets.
They pelletize it, right?
Yeah.
So they actually take it to a sawmill. And now, what they advertise to these communities in the southeastern part of the United States, right? Just to keep in mind, effectively what that is we're exporting our forests,
Trees,
as an
yeah.
energy resource
Yes.
in 2022,
And calling it renewable.
because that's the green thing to do. And these guys are getting rich doing it, right? And so, but the story that was told back in 2017, 2016, 2017, when these projects were proposed, and a lot of these are smaller communities, and a lot of these smaller communities, it's people who have moved away from places where they, hate people getting in their business and stuff, and so they participate in their local community stuff, and they get together, and they had like a town hall, and this company, I think it's called, I can't remember the name of the logging company now, but they actually got together with the community and they talked about how they were coming in to be green. They were just going to take the waste wood from the sawmill, right? There was already a timber industry in this part of the world, wasn't nearly as booming, and they were just going to take the waste wood, right? All the knotted wood, the dirt wood, and they were going to pelletize that and ship it out. But now they're clear cutting forests, obviously, because once you have demand for waste wood, you don't have.
You get a taste.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just start producing the waste wood, and so part of the documentary is literally they follow the trucks. Like they follow the truck from the facility to the forest area. They watch them cut the logs. They're full clear cut logs. They take them back to the sawmill, and they follow them in a car, like with a camera, and they pelletize them. They go put them on a barge. They ship them to Europe.
So the company's still pretending it's waste wood.
Well, that's still on their website,
Right?
Okay. And net zero is like mentioned 1 million times on their website, right? And I'm sure they're getting shitloads of subsidies, and but at the end of the day, it's just without even mentioning the whole energy input to energy output thing. If you just go from the sheer fact that they're then throwing them in these old coal fire plants in Europe, right, and they're cogen facilities, so there still might be a little bit of coal operating, but they're cogenning it with this wood pellet.
It's so retarded. Oh my god!
And they mentioned carbon net zero. I just want people to know, like coal is like
It really is.
so. I mean, there's almost no other way to say it, right?
It's narrative building. That's all it is.
It's so
My favorite
fucking
was
story,
dumb.
right?
My favorite was there was like the one local guy that in the clip that you posted that they were interviewing or whatever, and he's like, "I'm fine with people burning our forests, but it should be us, not the Europeans."
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument there too, right? Like,
Well, let's get into because I know me and you were going part of this conversation this week on Twitter, like the whole concept of net zero, or people trying to say like Bitcoin mining will be carbon negative.
yeah, it does. I think in the end it does a disservice. I think oftentimes in the moment, I mean, I get triggered by that too, right? Because I mean, one, I just think carbon accounting is so flawed because what we are talking about right now, the fact that these people are deforesting in the United States, shipping it on diesel barges.
You're cutting down things that take carbon out of the atmosphere.
Well, the only things, really. I mean, it's plant life that takes carbon out of the atmosphere, right? And puts it into the soil. And you're cutting down like the most efficient form of that plant life that does that. But beyond that, like, there's an energy density efficiency equation here. Like people maybe don't realize that coal is an amazing thing. Like when we first started using coal, it was an amazing thing because we got to stop burning forests. Like that was we were gonna deforest the entire United States. If
Yeah,
everyone
we
just-
came full circle.
Yeah,
well, in the
we've
UK,
become-
got to the point where they didn't have it.
Yeah.
They almost didn't have any forests.
Yeah, and
Like,
how much taxpayer money did they spend on making sure that their forests came back, right? And they did. And
they
so-
literally thought they were going to go into a depression because
Yeah.
they weren't going to have energy because they didn't have wood. And serendipitously, somebody discovered how to harness coal.
Oh, it's like all of a sudden coal. It's like, well, like energy dense per kilogram per pound it's a joke. And then when you look at the actual carbon dioxide emissions with wood, it's like 65% more carbon dioxide emissions per megawatt hour. So you need to burn so many more trees, right, to get to the same as what a lump of coal kind of would have gotten
And
into.
another
so-
thing too, that, like from a narrative building perspective with coal, particularly when the people paint the picture of coal being dirty, they harken back to industrial UK, where you have like the images of smog and the sky was just black because they were burning
when
so much
everything
coal.
was coal fire.
Yeah, but since then, our coal fired facility has gotten significantly quote unquote cleaner. Like,
Oh, they're so clean you can burn wood in them.
It better, but I do know that there's still some output that is problematic if there's a local community near the plant.
Yes.
Like coal is still, less desirable than something
Absolutely.
like that. There's no question about
No,
it.
there are
But,
trade-offs.
If you're deciding between producing an electrical output that can heat thousands of homes or
And it's pretty
not
cl-
having that, what's the obvious
Yeah.
choice?
Well, and it's cleaner than a lot of alternatives, right? It's cleaner than burning wood, right?
Right.
I've mentioned this before, where and I think it was Jordan Peterson where I got this information from, was one of the biggest killers of adolescents in the
inhalation
world is
in
well, it's
Africa.
acute upper respiratory illnesses, right? So it's
All of
lung
them
infections.
are just burning open wood fires
Exactly.
in their homes for cooking and for heating, and it's
you give them a bag of
destroying-
coal, tens of millions of kids under the age of 15, like 8 to 15 years old, they don't die.
Yeah.
They don't die. Now, by the way, if you inhale a lot of in close proximity, coal, if you're doing a lot of coal barbecuing, like you can be inhaling some products from the coal, which are not good. But like, at least from what we understand, it's like, it doesn't kill you when you're 13. It kills you maybe when you're like 66. So it's like, well, it's better. Right. It's like, now this isn't a perfect system, obviously, but I would much rather, give all of these people some coal, which wouldn't be nearly as expensive of a thing to do. You don't even need a grid for that, right? You can just keep coal in the shed, and it can rain on your mountain of coal, and the second it gets cold, you go shovel it in the oven, boom, like you got electricity, you got power. There are beautiful things to it, right? The second we start the moralizing conversation, which is so fun about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin doesn't give a shit about like how, if your energy was clean or dirty or disrespectful at dinner. Like it treats every
Bitcoin slapped my mom.
yeah, Bitcoin yelled at the dinner table. It doesn't care, right? It treats every computational hash the same. And so, and thank God, by thermodynamic law, computational hashes can't be cheated, right? There's a efficiency threshold there, or an efficiency ceiling. And so, we're in this space where we're participating with this network that it's going to disrupt a lot, right? It's the carrot that kind of brings people down a lot of different rabbit holes. The energy one, though, the way it's going to disrupt energy and the way, like the things we're going to see happen. I mean, I already see, the banning of ASICs. I think not slush pool specifically, but I think, mining pools in general are going to have massive scrutiny. Slush pool might be the one that's the best because they're like in the middle of, they're like check, right? They're like a check.
Checks are based.
Yeah, well, they're just neutral, like just kind of like, I don't, you're kind of you're not taking any side, kind of a thing.
Like Foundry, 100%, like completely.
Yeah. And the big, here's the thing, like the big miners, I think maybe they underestimated their the ancillary cost of dealing with Washington, the cost of lobbying, the cost of getting in bed with regulators. Like, yes, while at some point, if you're going to be in the power game, at a certain scale, you're going to be dealing with regulators because, like nobody has 100 megawatts of power, and they're at least dealing with a county or a state or a city to some degree. And so they knew they were going to get in bed. I think that they probably grossly underestimated what that costs. what kind of trade-offs take place when you do that, right? That's the benefit of being a small, more nimble, maybe an oil and gas producer, kind of a miner, right? Where they might have beyond the power cost, they have a huge advantage.
Have you seen the video of our hash hut that we have up in Tennessee?
Yeah, it's freaking
it's
sweet.
like it's back there in a farm in a very rural area.
So
Like, nobody's ever gonna find it. No county officers ever gonna come. Like
It's the last Bitcoin mine to get turned off, kind of a thing. Like
Yeah.
if there's like a military assault on Bitcoin mines, like I'm the same way. I've got a Bitcoin mine in the middle of absolute nowhere where you
you've
can't
got,
even
like-
access it.
You've
half
got
the
like
year.
a ghillie cloth over yours.
Oh no, those are the black boxes. Those are more suburban. I mean, they're still in the mountains of Colorado, but they're a little more suburban. Like I've got a Bitcoin mine that's like 2 hour. It's like down a level B road where you can't access it half the year because the snow's too deep. You need like a tractor, and so like even I couldn't get to it.
So here's my
Without a
question
snowmobile.
though: is we've already started to see some regulatory pressure start to mount, and we've seen efforts by whatever his fuckface from Ripple, who's
Eric.
trying to team up with Greenpeace and
What the hell is his name?
can't remember now.
Chris Ripple,
Chris Ripple. That's a great
Larson, right?
Chris Larson. That's it.
Larson, and then
but
who else was behind?
I only know
my,
the
my
Brad
question
guy.
is, is a lot of that pressure being stifled and held back until the merge? That like there's a concerted effort to wait until they can really focus that specifically on Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's a waiting. It's more of just like a, I mean, maybe it's loaded in the cannon. Of course, they've already used it. It's already been. I mean, that's what got me on Bitcoin Twitter. That's the only reason I'm like sitting here today. Is I was a Twitter consumer. I wasn't tweeting, right? I mean, just the idea of tweeting to me, like I didn't like it. And
Now you love it,
right, but when
Look at you now.
when I got interested again, look at me now, right? When I got interested by Bitcoin, I had a good buddy who, like the one who had told me to keep looking, right, to keep learning about this thing. I had him tell me, like, he's like, you got to get on Twitter. Like, he's like, even if you need to use it or whatever. He's like, but like the community kind of lives there, and you'll see articles, you'll see things come out. All the companies that are building the space are there, and so I was like, okay. So and part of it was all the articles I would go to. They would all have a Twitter like link in there. Like it would always be like, well, then there was this tweet by the CEO, and then I'd have to make a Twitter account just to view the damn tweet and stuff anyway. So or interact with it, and so like that's what brought me there. And then what got me to speak out was this threat, was everyone saying, well, yeah, but Bitcoin's bad for the environment, or it's, the quote unquote waste of energy, right?
Well, but clearly, I mean, my point is we've already seen an onslaught, and it seems like it's a decent amount already. I'm thinking,
Oh, yeah.
have we seen just the tip of the iceberg?
I think it's
I
gonna
mean,
get worse.
it's gonna get worse, but
way worse.
the timing couldn't be worse for them. Like we're literally in a global energy crisis.
Exactly.
Bitcoiners are just like, look, this shit is obviously important. You fucked it up. And I mean, I think the arguments of Bitcoin miners using wasted and stranded energy are like,
You don't think it could go the
ironclad.
opposite way? Like we're in a global energy crisis, so why are we wasting that energy on Bitcoin?
Oh no, it will go that way. That's what they
Yeah.
will
That's
say.
already
is-
started.
Yeah, no, they'll say, that's exactly what they'll say. And then
There's better use cases
they'll
for this.
Well, that's the whole thing, is right.
People are dying.
Yeah.
It's the whole
Do
idea
you
that
even care?
do you even care?
Bitcoin slapped my mom and
I hope
killed
you
a
got enough
bunch of
Bitcoin
people.
today by killing people
Exactly.
with your computers.
I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, like no, I think no, it will go there, right? That's I don't remember who said it, but the whole concept of you have to spend 10 times the amount of energy disregarding and correcting.
I think it's called Brandolini's Law.
Brandolini's law. Yeah, we have to spend that extra energy. They're always going to make the burden be on us to come in and say, well, actually,
It's like if someone
This
says
is not
bullshit,
energy that was going to be
it
used-
takes 10 times the energy to refute
Refute
that
it.
bullshit.
to refute
Yeah.
that bullshit. Yeah, and so we're gonna have to try to get ahead of it, right? That's part of what I try to do at times is like you said, like net zero Bitcoin mining, or like even the reports on the Bitcoin Mining Council about like how much they say what percentage of global energy does Bitcoin use? Oh, it's only this percent, and I'm like, well, why are we even looking at this shit? Like, because what they're effectively saying is that this percent isn't bad, but what that implies is that, well, maybe.
Well, I disagree with that one.
Well, no, but what this implies is that there is a bad percent,
Well, no, what
and I think that
so like
it's
as
moot, right?
as
energy consumption is not bad.
as an extremely bullish Bitcoiner, I expect that energy usage to eat up the energy usage of the world, for Bitcoin to use a significant amount of the world's energy. But right now, at this moment, when we have people yelling at the top of their lungs saying Bitcoin uses too much energy, if you slap them with the chart that shows that Bitcoin is not using this negligible amount of energy, it just makes them look like a complete fool. I think there's definitely some benefit to that argument.
I would argue that you both are fools because you're sitting there, you've capitulated on the concept that energy consumption should be minimized.
Well,
you're just proving that they're a fucking idiot and they're speaking out of their ass without any kind of real factual basis.
Well, I agree. It is potent in the moment, but
you're not incorrect in that regard.
But again, if you lean on that moving forward and it grows from 0.1 to 10%, then people are like, way too much. But the question or the whole conversation should be shifting. This is why I'm very bullish, because it seems like the energy cognoscenti who actually know what's going on and Bitcoiners beginning to team up like the Alex Epsteins of the world, Brian Gitt. I won't be surprised if Schellenberger begins championing Bitcoin as well, are really beginning to shift the focus from demonizing individual uses of electricity and highlighting that energy is extremely important and we should want more. We shouldn't be focused on Bitcoin, or in an ideal world, Bitcoin's overall usage of energy in the world will decrease because we're building so much more energy capacity.
Well, exactly. And
do you think that's what will happen?
That's what should happen. Will it happen?
But the amount of energy that Bitcoin's consuming will nominally probably go way up, right? And so, but this is, that inherent idea. I think the flaw comes from understanding the alternative, which is, a world, even the world that we had maybe 2 years ago, a world where energy is abundant and economic is a world where it's okay and cheap to quote unquote waste energy. Right? For example, we've got, seltzers, bottled water here, right? The amount of power required for individual bottles of water, 16 fluid ounce, just to be a product in the world is only something that can exist when energy is abundant and economic. The more abundant and economic energy is, the more research and development we can do at lower costs. It lowers the costs of any kind of marginal business. And so ultimately, we should always push to have energy be the most competitive and ultimately then the most efficient market, because it'll bleed to all the other markets efficiency. It'll bleed best pricing. You won't find this, random ass energy inflation that bleeds into this commodity, which fucks up the fertilizer, and then these people don't have food for 8 months, right? like that's what happens today, is because we have such, regulatory intervention, such deadweight loss. We find ourselves, trying to compensate, right? And then, thank God for some forms of energy that are more portable. I mean, do you think we could be shipping wood chips across the Atlantic if energy wasn't pretty damn abundant and economic as it is today? Energy has been artificially kept, I think, even more economic than it probably should be.
Well, you look at the Henry Adams curve.
Exactly.
And it's the energy per capita is just flatlined since the 70s.
Energy per capita it's like, we have not grown other than what we needed to. And we've done it in a really kind of rigid way. Bitcoin's going to allow that flexibility from zero, from the individual at their home all the way up to the, I'm building a utility power distribution company for a small town that I hope to be here in 20 years kind of a thing. It's going to help all of them, maybe not equally, but it's going to certainly improve the economics of every single one of those risk projects. And that's a good thing, right?
I just want to pull it back for a second.
Let's pull it back.
Do you think I'm asking both of you, and I could ask Jevi too, 20 years, is Bitcoin using more than 50% of global energy production?
No way.
Not at all.
Bitcoin will be...
No way.
But Bitcoin will be...
No?
No.
Why so bearish?
I think
no, I don't think it will ever.
I think it's because our capacity to produce energy is going to increase so much.
Well, then,
Right, that's what Marty was saying earlier.
Well, the numbers aren't good either, Matt, right? Because what is it today, right? We're talking about 20 million. It's about 910 Bitcoin are rewarded to miners.
And the
every
electricity cost is a natural.
You guys just sound really
is a
bearish.
natural growth.
Well, I mean, just saying,
inhibitor for Bitcoin mining. If it's consuming 50% of the world's energy,
It's
I
only
don't think that's possible because the energy would be so expensive.
Well, that would mean that like if that was the case today, that would mean that the total world's energy every day is only worth like $14 billion, and Bitcoin is half of that, right? Because it's about every year, right? So every year it's what $7 billion at today's price, right? So it's only $7 billion.
But Bitcoin will be worth more.
Yeah, it'd be worth like $5 billion.
Exactly. No, but that's where the X is. I was going to say come in. Like how much value is in annual energy markets? Right? Like, well, okay, so in order for it to be half, we need like 100x from here. I mean, $2 million Bitcoin price. But the problem is rewards go down. So in 2 years, Matt, that gets cut in half, right?
Right,
so,
of course.
So that price needs to then double again just to be back to where it was
Well, we've
on
never
par.
in the history of Bitcoin, there's been brief periods, but we've never been, the reward and purchasing power has always gone up. Or the
absolutely.
reward measured in fiat, but purchasing power.
and
Like
I
how
agree.
much bread you can buy with the reward has gone up. Cows or whatever.
Right, and I agree that one, it's going to go up, price and the amount of energy mining. But like I've said it before in the oil field, the amount of natural gas in just the United States in the oil field that's wasted would be like a doubling, tripling of the network.
We're just going to get more efficient at consuming that.
And so we would need, like, by my math, we're talking about at least like a $400,000, $500,000 Bitcoin, $600,000 Bitcoin price, even to justify that next miner coming in, right? Because that's the thing is we need Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price needs to go up in order for the mining industry to grow or mining market to grow, right? For there to be a new entrant or for a current entrant to want to scale up, right? Bring more terahashes online, absorb that competition. And so, who's going to last? Who's going to be most incentivized to scale up, and who's going to kind of be the I guess, where does the most growth come from? I think it comes from the well-utilized waste energy sources. And I think we need a multi-million-dollar Bitcoin price to even justify getting a good percentage of that. Even 60% of global waste gas, we need a multi-million-dollar Bitcoin price. That would be so many terahashes.
I said 20 years.
Yeah. 20 years is a long.
I also think that
it's a long time.
I also think
You're
there's
right.
going to be a big uptick in nuclear. I think we're going to have this
push is coming.
We're going to
shove.
have this shell shock that occurs.
Push is coming to
people
shove.
like Germany who, despite everything staring them straight in the face, saying you need to keep your nuclear going beyond the end of the year.
Do you think there'll be nuclear plants that just aren't connected to
They
the
just
grid?
negged on that this week.
I entirely think that
that
that's
are just
possible.
like mining operations.
I think
just
that
like in the
there's
middle of
going to be an
nowhere?
uptick in small modular reactors. They're going to make it more available for people to be able to spin up new effective colonies. You think about Brandon's piece on
Now that future will
pioneer
not
species.
That future won't exist if we allow the world to destroy the fossil fuel industry as they're trying to today. Because you just can't have nuclear without abundant.
I agree with that.
I just want to put my hand up and acknowledge the poetic beauty of the fact that we're having this conversation in here while Mark Moss and Alex Fetsky are doing the launch of their book, The Uncommunist Manifesto. Because at the end of the day, all of what we're describing right now comes down to some sort of communist tendencies leaking into the political world globally.
Yes, and how Bitcoin helps shatter these boundaries a little bit. Helps shatter
20
the chains.
years. 20 years.
No way.
Not
Cause
over
there's-
50.
There's no way.
We're not
Cause
getting to
there's
50%.
So
man.
20
I'm just-
years. Over under 20%.
under.
Under.
Really?
I think it'll hover around 5% max.
Wow.
I'd say potentially even less.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I hope that that's nominally a 50, 60, 100 times
You're taking
increase
the
from
over?
today. Right?
Half Bitcoin in 20 years?
I mean, I'll definitely take over 5%. What do you say, 5%?
So we're
Say 50%.
massively over
when
that.
we're in our 50s at Rabbit Hole Recap, like 2000 whatever, somebody's gonna have to roll back to we got our live chat fact checker in the studio right now.
Fact check right now.
Won't-
So you're gonna have to
Yeah, Jevi's
mentally note
the-
this and in the live chat in 50 years be like,
Maybe you guys will be guests on your kids' podcast. Maybe that's,
There you go.
that's actually funny you say that. Mac, my son loves, just dox my son, loves the podcasting gear. Whenever we're done podcasting on the back deck, he comes out and starts talking into the mic. It's hilarious.
It's interesting
super
to
cute.
to hear yourself in headphones. I mean, I imagine as a kid, for the first time, it's because there's
My kid always wants to
nothing
do that
like
when
it.
he comes into my office, and I've got a whole webcam set up for video calls, and I can loop back the audio for him, and he pops those on. He'll be stuck there for 20 minutes. Doesn't want to.
listening to himself. Yeah. No, so sorry. I don't think it's gonna be that big. I mean, which by the way, I think
You don't have to apologize.
I think it's a good thing because what that indicates is,
We're being productive elsewhere.
I mean, well, and productive elsewhere, ultimately less waste, right? A lot of people, because I harp pretty hard on the carbon accounting system, right? And this whole ESG
As one should.
nonsense, as I think is deserving, right? It's deserved some proper mocking, especially just because they've never been right. They've never been right, and so it's hard not to mock. But a lot of people think that like I have this idea of like anybody going out and just dynamiting open mountains and like just like fuck the ecological situation or the environment, just produce resources. And like that's not the case at all. I mean, one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin, I think, is it penalizes waste. Where up to this point, fiat doesn't penalize waste, not even close, right? Energy producers
It incentivizes
them to waste, and
It also incentivizes consumers to waste.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing. And so that's where, with Bitcoin bleeding in, it makes that waste painful. Where today, you have two operators and they both have the exact same amount of gas, 100, MCF a day, and one of them is flaring it and one of them is mining. And that if that persists for enough time, this guy's just going to kick this producer's ass because he can make more value with the same amount of hydrocarbons. And so that's painful for this guy. Just that thought is painful. And you know who else it's painful for? It can also be painful for the midstream, the guys that provide the pipelines, because oftentimes those guys are not very agreeable, right? They get their terms because they're the only pipeline in town. Otherwise, what are you going to do with your gas?
Yeah.
Well, now mine Bitcoin, right? And so like, there's some.
It's very similar. It's very similar to like the idea that under like sound money, people are more there's a stronger incentive to save rather than frivolously spend, right? And I feel like Bitcoin does that even more on the energy side because it's a direct, permissionless, basically exchange for energy to Bitcoin.
Right. I think it makes the consumer side of it is probably a bigger piece because
So like the first part of this conversation where we described like how mining fits into like the energy sector is the first order effect. Like we find these wasted energy sources, we use them to mine Bitcoin. And then you get into the second order effect. By using those wasted resources to mine Bitcoin, you're securing and propagating this ledger that produces the sound money. And the secondary effect of that sound money is what we're describing now. So that's what and that's another thing that people can't do today is like think on these higher orders and they only think surface level first order. They don't think second, third, fourth order effect.
But wouldn't that point to a higher percent of energy production?
like say at least 5% in 20 years.
I mean, so like right now, there's not really a strong incentive not to waste energy in like the fiat world we live in. Maybe with this recent energy crisis, there'll be a stronger incentive because prices will rise or whatever. But in a post-Bitcoin world, if I'm operating something and I'm using energy, that energy could also be Bitcoin to me if I don't use it. So I'm more inclined to not have that light on or not have that AC running or not have that whatever because my miners over there are making me money.
So I think the conflation there, conflating being a high percentage of the total energy produced and being very abundant. Maybe being a part of 90+% of all energy infrastructure has a Bitcoin apparatus, a Bitcoin.
But it's not
tether.
always running.
Maybe it's not always running, but maybe just the nominal amount, right? The amount of mining activity going on versus the total amount of energy being produced in the world. Mining's a small part, but it's a foundational piece of this macro puzzle, right? Where it's very abundant and very frequent, but nominally in terms of power consumption, I think about it, right? So 20 years, we're talking about a block reward of like a tenth of a coin, right? I think we're down, that's like when we're down like 0.147 or whatever it is. And so maybe we're talking about 144 blocks in a day. And so we're talking about like 10 Bitcoin a day without talking about fees. And so maybe up to 50.
Massive amount.
Right. So it's 10, yeah, exactly. 10 Bitcoin a day. If,
it's life changing.
If we have $1 million Bitcoin price, okay.
Bearish.
Well, but listen, seriously, but if we had $1 million Bitcoin price, that would be half the daily rewards as today. Because today it's about $20 million a day.
Right.
So Bitcoin needs to be 2 million By the time we get down to that,
We'll be way
right?
past that.
Exactly, right. It's to even have the same dollar value as
We'll be measuring
what we're
in
seeing
cows.
today. And so that's where I think it'll be a smaller piece where even Bitcoin at 50 million, right? Well, if it's 10, if it's, there's only 10 per day, well, okay, it's $5 billion a day. I mean, Exxon sells $5 billion a day of gas all day long. Like they've probably got enough, in their own inventory to deal with that. So like as a piece of the total macro energy industry, I think it's still going to be,
to
small.
bring it back to the conversation around, the incentive to save on a hard money standard. What people have just been like slowly had the wool pulled over them. When we switched to a fiat currency and we started globalization, we started outsourcing more of our production of consumer goods to other countries because it was cheaper, it was more affordable for consumers here.
And another important part of that, we wanted the dollar to get out there.
We
as
wanted
well.
the dollar to get out there, but we also wanted to we wanted to move all of our awareness of any of the
Trade-offs
pollution and trade-offs that would occur as a result of it to places that were not in our backyard, right? And so when you try to have a sensible conversation with boomers about how our current system is set up and how we rely on all of these resources that get shipped in from elsewhere and how this entire system has resulted in the erosion of the middle class in the United States over the last 50, 60 years. They're totally oblivious to it. They don't even see it. And it's really hard to even start that conversation when they can't even see what's been happening in front of their own eyes.
I think they're starting to see a little bit more now. This whole how stark inflation has become seems to be hitting people. Like I even asked the Uber driver, I had a boomer Uber driver today, and I asked him, like, what is because he owns a couple of different cars, right? And he rents them out to guys to drive for Uber. And I asked him, what do you see in terms of the cost of like owning one of these cars versus two and a half years ago, 18 months even. And he's like, oh, it's at least double. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, I've had to, he's like, everything's up, right? He's like, but also the fares are up per mile, right? It's like what Uber drivers are getting paid, it has gone up, right? But so is their fuel. And so there's, this very, very inefficient price discovery where if you have consumers on a sound money standard, I think you have more intelligent consumers. And not only are they incentivized to save, they're incentivized to tactfully buy, right? To like bargain. They're bargain shoppers, right? I mean, every Bitcoiner is probably a really big bargain shopper, right? Hence the Fold app and stuff. And so, I think we see better price discovery. We see smaller, arbitration, smaller price differentials, and like, from one town to another kind of a thing. In a world where buyers quickly go over there and they suck up any of that cheap deal. They make sure to get rid of it, and then prices restabilize, right? I think the problem is 20 years. I mean, how long does it take to change money? I think we've all underestimated how long it takes to change money.
What is your energy consumption personally? What percentage of that is Bitcoin?
You're still on this.
What percentage of your energy consumption as in total?
I mean, he sat over there quietly, and he did come up with one hell of a question that decimates my argument because mine's like 90%.
Right, Marty, what's yours?
I couldn't. I mean, I don't know.
Like 90%.
No, if you think about, I guess me driving, right? Automobile use has got to be a big chunk. Right?
Our well for our hash hut, I think it produces like 55 to
60
MCFD. So
that's huge. That's so much energy. 60,000.
I think I'm at like my personal energy mix is like 60% Bitcoin.
yeah,
I'm at like 10 tops.
10%.
I'm very reasonable.
See, even him though.
Yeah, but is everybody going to be a Bitcoin miner?
Yes.
Someday.
We got to get ASIC
Maybe
modification.
someday.
ASIC utilities.
Well, I mean, I think people's like water heaters will be
Ronin
Bitcoin
miner.
miners. I think they'll be. I think we haven't seen the retail Bitcoin mining boom yet. We're seeing like little tingles of it, but we basically need, and we're starting to see this, is we need the ASIC life cycles to last, right? We need ASICs to not go obsolete.
Commoditize.
Yeah, you don't want them to go obsolete so quickly. And once that happens, all of a sudden there'll be an ASIC in I'm not going to say every home. That would be the provocative thing to see, an ASIC in every home. But I think a lot of people's personal energy mix is going to be very, very high because it's a better use of, it's a more, the incentives are direct. You're making more money if you are mining.
I mean, we did eat beef jerky at the beefsteak last night that was dried out with the heat from an ASIC.
True.
There you go.
I tried looking for numbers on how many space heaters are sold in the United States every year, because it feels like every single one of those should be running an ASIC.
I mean, I've been saying this for a long time that, you know, the integration certainly like into an HVAC system of some sort is there. Usually when you want to do heat transfer, you want to be either immersed or, you know, have a water block, right? Like, you know, water cooled system.
Like water heaters seem obvious to me, especially
water
like
heaters,
full building water heaters, like for
exactly,
30 apartments or something like that.
And we're getting there, right? That's happening today. Like those projects are being tested and occurring right now. Like we're in that.
But isn't there a
epoch,
concern
right?
that if the power goes out, you still want to have a hot water heater?
Well, so then you have a backup of natural gas,
so you have
right?
Okay.
Or something of that,
But
right?
people already have electric water heaters.
But
So that's like,
that's
if
the
they already
point.
have an
those are
electric
shit
water
coins.
heater, is this what it is?
Well, yeah, electric water heaters are abundant at this point. So if power goes out, it's toast. You know, there's no
I mean, and we
defense.
saw that in Texas when your power went out, and Marty sent a tweet of like his gas stove, and he was like, you know, I'm like, he was flexing on all the fools
Yeah.
that had electric stoves.
Well, but
Lights
listen,
are out.
like,
I'm cooking bacon, bitch.
Right?
but it goes back to the smarter consumer. It's like Bitcoiners are smarter power consumers because, you know, we understand we have this arbitrage tool of energy, and you know, at Upstream Data, we've you know, definitely shipped out a lot of home miners. And what are they doing? Well, anywhere where there's low power jurisdictions, like there's probably going to be more mining activity than, you know, Southern California. And so we're going to see those, and enough miners get there, and then those prices come up. Right?
It is crazy how, like, abruptly getting into Bitcoin mining changes how you view
almost
electricity.
immediately.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm constantly on Brains Pool, soon to be Brains Pool, and then Insights.Brains, looking at hash price, looking at hash value, looking at.
my dad told me to turn the lights off for 15 years. Never gave a shit. Bitcoin mining, boom, done. Makes so much sense.
But
So much sense.
You know, talking about the arbitrage opportunity, there's a huge uptick in electric cars in Sweden, in large part because your home electrical utility can be dynamically tied to the price fluctuations. And so they have different rates throughout the day and into the night. And it's super cheap at night when power consumption is lower.
And they're charging
And
their
so
cars.
you can hook up your charger to be smart about when it's pushing energy into your car. Why are they not running ASICs overnight?
No, it's same deal, right? Same with tons in California where there's tons of solar, you know, and residential solar, where they're pushing back a lot of that solar to the grid, right? And it's good to be oversized, right? I personally want to have solar on my house. Like I want to be immensely oversized with my solar. I hope I can dedicate like a half acre to pure solar. And you know, ultimately it's because that optionality is great, but when your option is either consume it or send it to the grid for like a penny, which is what the grid gives you, like a penny or two, like it's not that great.
that's when you end up with that bullshit, like inefficient battery packs and stuff like that.
Have you
that people
seen
do.
Rep Thomas Massey's setup?
Yes.
His
My
home?
his is clean. But he's obviously set up some solar before. Holy
Yeah.
shit! Like he's a technician.
He's a
a-
full-on MacGyver.
he's a
Full-
physicist.
yeah, he's a
Yeah,
physicist.
that's
I mean,
crazy.
that guy.
He
like,
studied at MIT.
yeah, like Joe Rogers just gave a talk on 3D printing and guns, right? And he talked about the evolution of that and how it's even getting to this point now where guys are starting to reverse engineer black powder, right? Because it's not like any of these ammo manufacturers or anybody, you know, give out their open source their recipe for black powder. So, you know, so apparently some guy in Japan like quote unquote cracked the code where you can make your own kind of stuff. And you know,
Did he wound up shooting Shinzo Abe?
I don't. But like,
Too soon.
way too soon.
I mean, it's a little. It's a
Sorry.
little pronto, you know.
I'm sorry.
But you know, where was I? No, so the black powder. Like, I think.
I don't know where you're going.
Well, no. Ultimately, it's a matter of that sovereignty. What level of sovereignty, right? Where I think with power generation, that could be the next step. Bitcoin mining will get us there with, you know, at the retail level. Where, you know, I'm somebody where if you asked me 4 years ago, you know, do you want to have triple backup power systems at your house and like I want to have a Stirling engine. I want to have an external combustion engine. Like I want to throw fire like wood or coal on a fire and my house comes to life.
I'm
Like,
going to power my
I want
house
that
with wood
option.
pellets from the southeast.
I want that option.
I'm going to ship it in.
Honestly, I don't think it's that big of a like. I think or
Can they
do it
barge
with,
into
do it
Nashville?
with pellets from your own land.
No.
Do it with
That
pellets
would be
from your
too
own land.
logical. No, I want it shipped in by tanker.
Yeah.
Fucks the Southeast. I'm going to ship it from Europe.
Yeah, I
We'll
wanna
do the reverse trade.
I'm with you on that. Just as a means of this is bullshit. Just to give them a taste so that they can like feel what it's like to think about. We're exporting our forests? Like, why does that just seem like the absolute worst idea I've ever heard?
I'm gonna make like Barack Obama and get a bunch of natural gas propane tanks on
Exactly.
on my property.
No, I mean propane's a great one, right? But to even have a backup for an internal combustion engine, because you can have internal combustion engine issues, right? Like
Yeah.
a nat gas generator goes
You know
down.
what was sneaky good about propane during Hurricane Sandy in New York? My parents live in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They have a propane generator. During Hurricane Sandy, everyone had gasoline generators. You couldn't get gasoline anywhere. Propane, like the truck literally just pulled up to the house.
That's
and
why I
just,
got a
filled it up.
tri-fuel.
Exactly.
I got a tri-fuel generator that can
Boom.
run on gasoline, propane, or liquid
It's a
natural
very
gas.
easy hack is the propane
Yeah.
generators.
I still need to get. There's an easy way to. I got to get my buddy Bob to do this, but I want to run from my natural gas line to my house. I want to run an external port so that I can run it off the nat gas if the power goes out, and then if that goes out as well, because utilities get super fucked, then I can switch over to propane.
That's the way to do it.
You're prepared, Jevy.
No, that's a
Well,
beautiful.
he doesn't have enough miners.
But that's a beautiful
I
thing.
am very bearish on that. apparently.
Well, and you've obviously thought through the idea of like, do I want to rely on do I want to have counterparty risk when it comes to electrifying my life?
Right.
And I think the longer you think about it, it's a non-fucking negotiable.
Yep.
Right. It's like, no, I hate the idea of being out of power and my only course of action is to like call this 1-800 number.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Well,
That's when people burn their furniture and stuff, right? That's what happened in Texas.
I'm in Minnesota. It's not a huge energy producer, and so I feel like we're a little bit more at risk in those kind of situations. If something were to really start to get pinched and supply is an issue,
You got plenty of forest.
and it's
We
cold
do
as
have plenty of
fuck
forest.
too.
Yeah.
it gets cold
Yeah.
as fuck.
And
So, like, heat
Canada's
is a
not
death-
helping you guys out
it's-
anytime soon.
I'm not escaping to Canada. I keep my passport on me most
Well, I'm
of the
not
time.
even saying you need to escape to Canada. I'm saying they could produce more of their oil.
They
and
could
fucking
produce-
help you guys
Sure.
out. up
North
there.
America, like us in Canada, we ought to have this unbelievable synergistic as well as competitive oil and gas industry, and instead we have this delineated bullshit that is just, it's tragic when you really think about it, because it could be, there's so much that is synergetic in terms of, we have refineries for some of their heavier crude and things, but the competition would breed just beautiful, abundant economic energy for all of North America, Mexico, Central America included. It'd be so cheap, even into South America. But instead, these imaginary lines that people have drawn in the sand, I guess, are.
It even happens on a state level. I mean, like you're in Colorado, different regulations in here in Texas, North
You're right.
Dakota.
You're right.
California.
I mean, the only real competition is between like Texas, Wyoming, maybe Oklahoma. There's like, Kentucky. There's like 7 states that are like free, pretty lenient on oil and gas producers. I mean, you still have all the feds to deal with to some degree. But, people forget that competition is best for the consumer.
Do you think
We
that
want that.
one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is my optimistic take, which my optimistic take is that people will get burned and then they will learn their lesson and they will seek out to improve themselves. And on a long enough time scale, we end up in a better place. And I've talked about that with Bitcoin privacy, sovereignty, all different sorts of things. Part of me kind of thinks that in this case, with the current energy crisis we have, maybe the worst case scenario thing, and I know it's sensitive because obviously no one wants people to die and feel real pain, but maybe the worst case scenario is like we teeter on the edge, but it doesn't actually turn really bad, and then the status quo continues and gets worse. Maybe there's an optimistic angle here that it gets so bad, that everything gets so fucking bad, that we see mass deregulation, that we see a move to more free markets, that we see more sane energy policy, just because it's so fucking bad.
I mean, it's going to get that bad. And it, like you said, it's fucking tragic and it's terrible, but the way things are going, like, again.
Well, and you would have hoped that the last
it's
2.5
fucking end of
years
August.
would have been enough of an obvious scenario to, precipitate that, to drive people to seek change, to want change, and nobody cares. Like I think it needs to get a lot worse before it finally cracks.
It's going to get a lot
You
worse.
need chaos because it's just all built up. Like you have this structure that's all built up, and like there's no. I mean, we were talking to Carr last week, and we were talking about like the bureaucracy and bullshit that you have to deal with just moving into a new office space, right? Or like I was talking about the Hollow Nut fundraiser we have tomorrow, like how hard it was for we didn't get a dunk tank, but like how hard it is to get a dunk tank, and like you gotta get insurance, and you gotta like do all this other shit to get a dunk tank where someone just gets thrown into a pool of water.
They just fall.
Right.
They don't even get thrown. They just
they just fall. Exactly. Like that is
problem
overregulated.
If a crack
Oh no,
occurs,
exactly. Yeah, then
water goes everywhere,
and the water goes down,
That's
and
a
like
massive
yeah,
amount of
messes
water.
Yeah,
up-
water
yeah.
destroys a lot of things.
Yeah,
just-
water's
But
bad.
my point is like all this shit is built on top of each other, right? All this complexity and bureaucracy and bullshit and inefficiencies all built on top of each other, and it's hard to imagine a world where it gets removed unless there's some kind of chaotic cleansing type of period.
And I think I agree with you that it's hard to imagine. I think the reason it's hard to imagine is due to what I think we understand as the level of corruption that those who benefit from this stack of bureaucracy and inefficiencies, those who benefit via control, via monetary benefit. If I was going to be a pure optimist and talk about if it was even possible for that would be a stage of enlightenment where effectively those who become in charge and really ultimately the populace becomes aware that, hey, there's a better way of doing things and demands change without this violence and chaos. Bitcoin's our best shot because I've seen it like firsthand. We've all seen it actually. You guys know what is it? Kevin O'Leary, right, from Shark Tank, the
Loser.
Mr. Wonderful.
Well, but hold on, okay, but
It's Marty's boy.
and he's gosh, he's a character, right? Mark Moss, who's out here, sat next to him back in February you were up at the stage too when they had that little like stage by the volcano for like the little TV stuff.
The news desk.
The news desk, yeah. So he was sitting up there with Kevin O'Leary, and Mark Moss shared the story with me that apparently Kevin O'Leary has come full 180 degrees. If you guys remember when he first got into Bitcoin, he was one of those like, hey, I just learned about Bitcoin. I'm here to fix it. It's too dirty. I'm going to make Bitcoin green, and we're going to make it have compliant and green blocks. They're going to be green Bitcoin, and there's going to be dirty Bitcoin.
He still owes an appearance on Rabbit Hole Recap.
He really does.
Oh, well, yeah,
if you're listening, Kevin.
Well, maybe this will bring back because I give him massive applause because apparently he's done a 180. Right now, the applause isn't really for him; it's for Bitcoin, right? Because what that tells me is that this guy, who, for all intents and purpose, if he was going to be introduced by anybody, what they would likely talk about is his experience, right? This is a guy that's got a lot of experience, probably invested in thousands of companies, so many companies he can't even spend a day on each one in a year, and he's got tons of experience. But obviously, he was still very ignorant to the world of energy production because it took this thing Bitcoin and all this criticism from guys like us on the internet, like, yeah, you're an idiot, green Bitcoin's fucking stupid.
It wasn't just the internet.
Yeah.
He heckled him live at Bitcoin 2021.
Kevin.
You did, Kevin. The mockery works because guess what? Bitcoin 2022, Kevin comes back, and what he told Mark Moss was, he's like, no, Bitcoin's going to like increase the efficiency of energy production and fix the energy industry. I think he might be leaning toward that area of like
net zero. We're back in net
exactly.
zero.
We
Thing,
might.
right?
I mean,
but is it a transition?
Incentivize renewables.
He owns too
step
many
along the
damn
way.
companies and too many companies. He probably watches BlackRock's investments too closely to speak bad against net zero. Same thing I think with Michael Saylor, right? Like, I mean, Michael Saylor's he's a more or less an engineer of the nth degree, right? A really deep thinker. I could classify him as after listening to a lot of what he said. He's got to see through this bullshit, right? There's no way he doesn't see through it.
Did you watch the episode when I had him on like a couple years
yes,
ago? And
but he can't say it because.
But that's the thing that pisses me off.
It sucks
when
right?
you know
The chain-
something's true and you like refuse to say it.
It's almost better if you're ignorant, right?
But it pisses me off more in a Bitcoin world because Bitcoin we have fuck you money, right? Like back 10, 15 years ago. Even if you're the richest guy in the world, you're Bill Gates or whatever, you still need to have friends like with bankers and stuff because you could still get rugged from your money. Like you're a billionaire, but you still need those
can still get rugged from his money.
Not if he's got fucking 24 C words memorized.
I mean, he can get rugged from a majority of his money.
MicroStrategy.
That's because he put too much of it into
most of it is
hard assets.
Presumably, most of it is MicroStrategy.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't want to speculate on his
but I'm
asset
saying is
allocation necessarily. But like,
there's a thing. certain group of billionaires that is almost more vulnerable than like the average lower middle class person, because
I hope
because they have more. Like we saw this with Voorhees, right? Like Voorhees was like notoriously one of our strongest ANCAPs in Bitcoin, right? And Shapeshift never did KYC, and then he became very successful, had a lot of money, had a
Sold
U.S. based
Satoshi
company
Dice for like 200,000
yeah,
Bitcoin or something.
but had
like
a
that.
U.S. based company, and all of a sudden there was a lot of things that could be taken away from him, right? It's like when you hit that certain wealth level, there's a lot of things that can be done to you.
But see, I would say that that's
You
not
have more to lose.
How do we prevent becoming Voorhees or something like that?
no, but
Well, I
nominally
mean, we're
Keep
poor
it all
as
in
fuck.
Bitcoin.
But see, that's more a product of greed, because nominally, yes, they have more to lose, but fuck, nominally they have so much to walk away with. I mean,
Right.
what's five? I mean, Elon Musk puts a couple of billion in Bitcoin. I mean, what the fuck? Like, that's a couple of billion that can never be taken from you.
Right, but it's still like
That's
2%
fuck you
of
money.
his wealth or whatever.
But that's fuck you money still. I mean, $2 billion in unconfiscatable bearer asset is fuck you money. I don't care
It's
who
like
you are.
it's
right?
it's
I mean,
the
what
change
can't you
in the
get
couch.
done? Yeah, what can't you get done for $2 billion other than like build a chip fabrication facility? And so, I'm with you in terms of like in a Bitcoin world. I
agree with the fuck you money.
I hope it will incentivize those who maybe
Let's
normally would be
let's get
silenced.
back to truth, people.
Yeah, let's get back to
Fucking,
fucking.
you know it's true.
We know it's true.
That's what frustrated me about that. Michael Saylor, I respect the hell out of you.
He's awesome, right?
I like you.
Good
But like,
shit.
just say what you know is. This is why we're in this global problem that we're in, because nobody wants to confront what is the actual truth.
Like the way I look at it, if there could have been a lot of different CEOs that got on the Bitcoin kind of train like Saylor did, could have been a lot worse. Right? We could have had more. We could have had a dang ESG.
I agree.
Really hard green energy kind of a thing. We could have. I mean, there could have been a lot worse. Michael Saylor seems to, and the reason I say that, he seems to be pretty well thought out. Like not a whole lot of bullshit, right? And it doesn't seem like he has a whole lot of chains attached to his opinion. But there's some chains, obviously, because God, I mean, there's no way that. I mean,
He's a physicist. He
A
knows the reality of the
12-year-old can
situation.
see that, a lot of this carbon accounting and stuff is just like systemically and absurdly flawed, and we obviously need. And by the way, people forget how like quick things happen. We have to remember these like kind of emissions acts and like this carbon account. This is only like 7-8 years old.
Yeah.
like this
It's
shit's
fucking
new.
ruining the world very quickly.
Yeah, this is like Obama's like second term. Like this is not that long ago.
Well, no, wasn't
we can change them.
I mean, carbon credits were a Republican idea first.
I don't know what. No, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
Rick
not
Perry
blaming
spun him up down
It
here.
was the idea, like, let's bring the free market to
Yeah, but
environmentalism.
I didn't mean to say Obama in the sense of like
Yeah.
who's responsible. I just meant like how recently it was, right? Obama was
My
president
point is, it's
only,
like there's bipartisan support for the bullshit.
Oh no, there's
Yeah.
plenty of bipartisan corruption to all the ESG bullshit.
Like the core of the grid problems that we have in Texas stem from Rick Perry and George Bush.
Yeah, that
Two
doesn't surprise me.
Republicans.
It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, well, but there is hope, right? That's my eternal optimist side of things would be like, well, what if there's an enlightenment? What if there's an enlightenment to a better way of thinking about things, denominating? Ultimately, we're talking about denominating value because, money is probably the best social tool we have other than maybe language, right? Maybe money is a language, but
The court says it is.
okay. That's,
Thank you, Justice Scalia.
that settles it then. I think the better that tool is, right? The more intertwined that tool is with thermodynamic law, with kind of the physical realities of this universe, the better signal it's going to be, right? I think the consumer level is where it's going to have the most impact. Probably talked about the less, because it's not as sexy as talking about how corporations are going to drop billions, right? Like I always say, like if we have 1 million home miners with one S19, that increases the hash rate 50% today. 50%. That'd be 100 exahash added, like that one. That's what 0.3% of the United States, kind of a thing. Like
Bullish on home money.
bullish on it.
I feel like what's a really relevant thing. I mean, if we're talking about like regulatory capture, we're talking about people. We're talking about ESG. I mean, recently we've had the tornado cash thing.
Yeah.
And we've had some people speculate that it could happen on Bitcoin,
Ari
where we
Paul.
could have. I didn't want to say his name. I said some people, Marty. Can you respect it?
Not today.
Talking about protocol level censorship, talking about the idea that certain mining pools, certain large miners will not include certain transactions in their blocks because
It's an unknown address or something.
or they're censoring it or whatever.
I mean, I think
What are your thoughts on that?
I want to hear Marty's thoughts first.
There's many thoughts here. I don't think it seems like that is an easy attack vector right now because pools, I think it's stupid, but they broadcast via the Coinbase message that they can put when they mine a block that they were the pool that mined the block. And so that, like, if it ever did push comes to shove, you can have the pools essentially pull that function out of their operations. That's the first layer, so that makes it a bit harder. The second layer is networking at the pool level. Like, how do they disguise their IP address so it's harder for these regulators and these governments to actually determine where the full node that is operating this pool is running. So that's a second layer of security. And then third, you always have the option to just solo mine, which is the most desperate case that you can get in, but it's there. And you just have to fall back on solo mining and just hope that you get a block.
I just think it's nuts that we're even talking about, like, I can maybe understand very explicit addresses being on an OFAC sanction list, right? Like, this is a known terrorist and this is his address and he has 40 Bitcoin sitting there. Fine, I get it, right? When you start sanctioning an entire piece of code that is built for the purposes of carving out financial privacy for yourself, that completely shifts the conversation. And the concept of a right to privacy is imbued in our Constitution. Even the UN Declaration of Human Rights makes it very clear that privacy, and in particular financial privacy, is a right that every human should have. And so to be able to say that it is okay to lock out an entire code base when you're not even discerning between legitimate or illegitimate uses, regardless of whether or not they're illegitimate, it doesn't matter. The act of maintaining your anonymity when using your own money is a fundamental human right that we have. And I honestly, I want to see this go into the courts as quickly as possible, and I want them to completely eviscerate the Treasury Department for this. It is unfathomable that we're even allowing for this to happen.
I agree with you. I think it's a human's rights tragedy,
Simple.
right? I mean, that's
These people want to kill us.
it's not the first. It's not even close to the first. These people want us fucking. We are the carbon dioxide.
The best was Marty's
They want
smile
us to
after he
mitigate.
said it.
They want to kill
You are
us.
the carbon they want to get rid
No,
of.
they
are the
hate
carbon.
us. They hate you.
They do.
They want you to
really-
be a fucking slave.
Probably worse. They are so incredibly apathetic. They just don't care about you at all, right? And if there's any way where they can sacrifice you to get themselves an inch ahead, they won't fucking hesitate, right? And so, what I think, along those lines, how will the world respond if something like that starts happening with mining? Like, I always get a little excited thinking about this because, I'm somebody where I hate that whole private, like, I saw this coming. From a pure game theory point of view, I anticipated this likelihood, and one of the reasons I love mining, right, is it's a lot more private way to purchase Bitcoin. I just have to pay a power bill, right, which typically you can do quite privately, and there's no way to track exactly how much of that was mining or whatever, right? And so, and plus, as a business, so long as currently we don't have to report our addresses to the government, right? So as a Bitcoin mining company, like we report what we've earned, we report our revenue and our costs and things, but we don't have to say where it is.
You're never getting my fucking address.
You're not getting my fucking mining addresses. Like, I'll shut my business down, and we'll have to file some type of an addendum on that fucking tax year or whatever, because I ain't fucking doing it.
Yep.
That's, again, nobody should know.
They've already asked for addresses in Canada.
Yeah, but that's Canada.
Yeah, but that's Canada.
So okay,
Canada's
let's
a
But,
shit
but hold on, let me finish my thought here, because I think there's another side of it where there's a cost associated with all this, like an actual financial cost to this regulation. And now, while that will be subsidized by taxpayers and things, it'll also get subsidized by the companies that have to participate with it. And these regulations will only increase, right? And so I think it'll be that downward pressure. My boss, Steve Barber, talked about this, I think at Bitcoin 2022, where ultimately there's a force pushing miners to scale up, and that forces economies of scale and the economics. There's a force pushing down, and that forces the regulation, the privacy you have when you're a lot smaller, the flexibility. And I think, while
diseconomies of scale.
In bull markets, this is all anybody wants to talk about. In bear markets and regulatory scrutinizing markets, this becomes a lot more of a realistic part of the conversation.
Well, you go.
Jerry, you're holding in a burp?
No.
I agree with you. I mean, I've talked at length about this idea of diseconomies of scale with Bitcoin mining, especially as we move forward in basically ASIC development, ASIC life cycles, like we were talking about earlier, just like commoditization of ASIC hardware. I think there's a lot of, you talk about like waste. They tend to benefit smaller scale mining, and I think that is our main advantage. But I will say, as someone who's been in Bitcoin for too long, I watched KYC start on one exchange, and everyone said no, they're not going to use that exchange, and then go to a second exchange, to the point where over like a 2-year period, 3-year period, it was just everywhere. And now when newcomers come in, they're like, oh, well, like, obviously, like, I'm going to give my ID and I'm going to give my passport. It's just completely normalized. Like, within a 3-year period, it was completely normalized. So a world where, what is Foundry at right now? Like 30%, 35% or something?
No, not that big.
Foundry's already KYCing all of their miners.
Yes.
Anyone who mines with Foundry is completely KYC.
So wait,
their clients actually,
like through the actual browser, through their, I'm sure they
yeah,
have an
you
app,
cannot
right?
sign up for the pool unless you're fully identified to them.
So
you cannot, and that is, their clients actually think that's an advantage. They prefer to know who they're mining with
because it legitimizes.
They want to
That's
know
what
that
Joyce was going to use for when they were going to partner up with Compass.
Those miners want everyone in the pool. They want to know who's in their pool with them.
Yep.
To them, that is an advantage, right? So the largest mining pool in the world right now is doing KYC.
Let me just tell you who's in the pool, okay? Everybody. I mean, a pool is it's an artificial concept to just arbitrage statistical, variations, right? Statistical arbitrage. Like, the pool is everyone mining. I mean, I don't understand what's the advantage there. Is it because they have an
They
idea
can go
of
to the regulators and say, like, oh, mining with.
We only have.
We know that nobody's
good
a terrorist.
actors.
So they
there's no
can,
terrorists in our
There's
pool.
no tour. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does
North Korea is in
Do these
our
people
pool.
think like a pool is like a partnership or something? Like it's a transaction. I'm going to give you Bitcoin for you arbitraging some statistical risk. And
Hey, look, it doesn't matter what these people think.
That's just. I'm just. The point is, what I'm saying is that shit's going to go away. Like that seems weird.
So
right?
Foundry went from like basically nothing,
Well, they came out of nowhere. They just
to the
launched
largest
Like
pool.
2 years.
Yeah, less than 2 years.
They came out of the gate at like number 3.
They went
crazy.
fucking crazy growth. Like if you go to like
They bought a lot of ASICs, I
Mempool's
think.
mining dashboard or whatever, and you click Foundry, it's just the most insane chart. So if I'm going to speak more realistically here, what I think happens is a lot of these large mining pools do start censoring transactions. Now I think the way Bitcoin's designed, it's really cool incentive-wise, and I think essentially if you have a censored transaction, you're going to end up paying higher transaction fees, and there will be miners that will accept those transactions, and that actually goes to the diseconomies of scale because those miners will be able to make higher fee revenue.
They'll make more money per terahash, right?
But I think there could be like a darkish period there. Like I don't know if that is.
It balances out.
I don't think so. I mean, we saw this with the OFAC compliant kind of in a way, right? Because the monetary loss is there's an argument and there's a risk from a corporate point of view. There's a risk that our shareholders are going to sue us,
Right.
Because now we're not acting in the
Fiduciary
best interest. There's a
duty,
fiduciary duty,
yeah.
right, to maximize profit, and they're sitting over here and they're I'm gonna throw 50 sat per byte on my transaction, and you're gonna not accept it because like I'm not on some list. I'm not an
within the
approved
letter of the law.
address.
That's the thing.
Well, within the letter of the law, right? But so long as that law isn't strictly defined.
But the problem is,
I don't think they're just going to come forward and be like, we're just going to start censoring out of the goodness of our hearts before you guys need to regulate us. Like, I think it's going to have to go to Congress. Like, a bill gets passed.
I don't trust our government. But if
I don't either. I mean,
look,
nobody does.
we see. So to bring it back to my analogy, and I just want to be completely clear. Like, I'm not footing Bitcoin. All my UTXOs have collaborative transaction history. Like, if anyone's transactions are going to be censored, it'll probably be mine. I'm not worried about it personally. but I think it's an important thought process to think about. With Coinbase actually welcomed the regulation. They welcomed the regulation. They brought in the bit license. They brought all this shit in. Why? Because they had grown past it. They were big. They were able to afford a team of lawyers on retainer. They knew that the exchange that was going to compete with them was going to maybe get started in a garage somewhere and couldn't afford that to get through that regulatory mode. So the large operations that we've seen only in like the last 3 years with the China exodus happened in the middle of 2020, right?
Last year. No, it was,
It was last year,
2021.
2021. It just fucking happened.
No, it's- yeah.
And we've seen this explosion of large warehouse, on-grid mining operations, public miners that have they can take tons of debt out very easily and squash people. And those miners benefit from heavy-handed regulation in the short term. Now, you hope that they understand the long-term incentives and don't try and kill their golden goose. But I've seen time and time again people not act rationally long term, and Coinbase, once again, to go back to the golden example, there is they had some very good years. They got to the public markets. They were able to dump on retail to a degree, and now you look at it, you're like, okay, well, they completely squandered their business. Like, they could have been so much more. But it doesn't even really matter, right? Because now we live in a world where all the exchanges are KYC. They basically boxed out everyone else from competing with them. There's a handful of competitors. Even the new competitors we see, like the Swans and the Strikes, they're all using Prime Trust. There's like 5 main players in the whole onboard and like on ramp, off ramp place that take care of 95% of liquidity.
Yep. I think there's a little bit of a difference here too between the exchanges. I know you're just making the comparison too, right? I think it's
not a perfect comparison.
No, it's not perfect, and I think it's important to highlight kind of some of the nuanced difference. And one that strikes me is, the monetization aspect, right? Where exchanges it's normal for them to sell user data and try to group users, similar to the way that all media companies do and internet companies do, so that they can then sell it to somebody who wants to list an ICO, right? What token words do they like the most? Do they like Doge? Do they like this? That all gets monetized, and there's a monetization aspect to the government, I think, from Coinbase, where they're getting massive government dollars for providing information and working with them, and so they kind of open up a revenue stream. On the mining side, I see more pain and kind of burden and cost more than I see a new method of monetization by allowing the regulators in, and because there's not really that data tracking kind of idea.
Margins are lower.
Margins are and mining is fucking hard, right? It's really hard to mine Bitcoin at a profit for a long time. You have to, even those out in the oil field, they certainly always have to bring more capital to the table. So there's while they have a lower marginal cost, they have a much bigger upfront capital expenditure. It's not like a 3-week we're all going to get rich. It's a guaranteed home run. Like, there's a lot of shit that can go wrong. A lot of people that are going to get wrecked. It's not easy. So I don't know. I think there's more pain in the
yeah. That's one of the beautiful things of mining. Exactly. The execution risk is so high.
It's so high
in mining that it's like
now if
a natural cleansing mechanism.
If they can lobby to say oh well, you need like a license to mine Bitcoin, right? Like, that's lucrative because
we could call it the bit license.
That's
the hash
license.
Yeah, the hash license. Well, that is lucrative because you shut down competition, right? So all of a sudden, all the home miners.
That's what I'm talking about. Shutting down competition,
right? But
that's what Coinbase.
But I'm betting that the guerrilla miners like myself aren't turning off.
Oh no!
Make Bitcoin mining illegal. You're gonna have to come to wherever I'm mining and unplug them yourself, man. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
No,
like, lock me in a cage for mining Bitcoin. Like, I'll take my chances with a jury.
Well, here's another path I'd like to go down to from a thought experiment perspective, and I think it could be viewed as like an optimistic view of the future, which is like, could all this talk potentially, we should definitely be thinking adversarial like this, but like, let's run down the scenario of where all the regulators, the governments, the tax collectors, society, due to this energy crisis, this food crisis that's materializing, completely just loses confidence, and you had just a complete wiping of the board because people just don't trust these institutions that are regulating or controlling our government anymore. And then, like, is there a scenario in your minds, like we've been thinking adversarially here, like, is the Black Swan event actually a collapse in confidence in these institutions, and then we get like a big bang of true free market competition in the mining and the other aspects of Bitcoin.
I think a lot of that depends on how quickly the government can try to maintain their parachuting of UBI and money into people's hands to stifle that realization, right? Like when there's chaos and the government is still giving you stuff, you continue to feel like, okay, well, they're supporting me and they're going to get me through this. So
it's optimistic chaos.
People aren't going to they're so frightened of the prospect of not constantly being reliant upon the government for all of their information and all of their resources that they're going to be more predisposed to seek out that free money and that fiat money in order to be able to survive. So,
but like we were talking earlier, like the dollar milkshake theory, like what, like if they do that, but like, so this is the game theory. They try to do that and it just exacerbates the situation.
Well, of course it does, but they can keep that up for a really long time.
Can they though?
This is such in other words, what we're talking about, confidence in the dollar to some degree, right?
Exactly.
Now, there's kind of a gun to everyone's head to have confidence in the dollar on a global scale, and that's the energy markets, right? That's the petrodollar, right? Where you've got to settle energy trade typically in dollars, at least.
But not anymore.
Not anymore with Russia calling some different shots. And so that could be falling apart. That's the first step, right? I mean, I think you've said it before. I know I have, is like if the confidence is going to be lost in the dollar, it first has to be lost on the international energy trade stage, right? If you all of a sudden start seeing countries trade for, gold, silver, even rubles, just stepping into other fiat currencies, that's just the middle finger to the United States is what that is really. But when it starts, when energy producers start demanding something different than your paper, than paper dollars, that's when it bleeds down, and all of a sudden other retailers don't. Because what happens when you can't buy gas with dollars now? It bleeds all the way down the system. Now, as a consumer, I don't demand dollars because nobody accepts them. It first has to kind of happen there, and it's
happening.
Putin flicked the domino by showing Europe, I've got you by the balls.
I genuinely thought when that crisis first started unfolding at the end of February, I genuinely thought that there was murmurings of accepting Bitcoin. He's getting hit with sanctions. Russia's getting hit with sanctions. It made sense.
Gold and silver would probably always happen first, right? I mean,
sure.
Pragmatically.
But, we still see the way in which it played out. It still ended up being there were opportunities for Russia to bypass a lot of those sanctions and to put counter pressure on that forced them to create all of these exemptions and all of these, openings for them to still be able to conduct business and to continue to go about everything that they want to do.
Maybe Bitcoin comes in there, right? Because what if there's a competitive edge there? I mean, what if Russia, and I don't know the numbers here, but say Russia is producing only 10% of the world's crude, but if they start they demand an acceptance of Bitcoin. There's a game theory to be the first one to accept Bitcoin for your power at large scale. And you hoard that, and Bitcoin goes 6x. Well, now you've got the monetary return of being a 60% production in this world. And all of a sudden it's, you're a massive competitive player, and everyone has to now decide, do we participate? Do we hedge our bet against our competitor by also investing in the thing that they're so heavily invested in?
They can mine directly at the same time too.
And they're going to.
Well, they already are. I think they already are. Gazprom.
They at least have the Compass miners.
Yeah. they got all those.
At least they've got
and
those.
they're going to mine with them in a partnership with between BitRiver and Gazprom.
Gazprom, yeah. No, I mean, Gazprom's only
Compass
a
miner.
massive
Think of it and this is this whole situation just completely highlights the idiocy of the sanctions. Like they just sanctioned BitRiver, completely rugged all the American citizens, and Russia's like, thank you for the hash, we're gonna go mine with it. Like, what the fuck?
Well, and they got the hardware super cheap because obviously the circumstances, right? They're locked up.
They got it for zero cost. They just fucking took it.
I was trying to be nice.
We all just got left behind.
I was trying to be nice.
We left all of our military equipment behind in Afghanistan.
That was only $800 billion worth or something. It was
it's a rounding error.
I think it was like
off topic. Were you guys able to listen to that interview I did with Lord Miles earlier this week?
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't yet.
So this kid,
but he's hilarious.
He's 22. He's bold. He just got back from a trip to Afghanistan.
He's been there a bunch.
Yeah, speaking of the weapons we left behind, he was buying So like the night vision goggles, the military contractors were selling them for $50,000 a pop. He, if you wanted to, could have bought them for like $150 US. And he said what the Afghanis on the ground were telling him were like China was coming in,
No shit.
Russia was coming in,
Of course.
Pakistan was coming in, just buying all
China,
all the weapons to reverse engineer them. And
I mean, Russia's in the middle of a war. Of course, they're going to come in for cheap U.S.-made military supplies. I mean, cheap Raytheon environmental surface-to-air missiles. I don't know if you guys remember that when Raytheon posted about their Raytheon posted on Twitter about their most environmentally friendly surface-to-air missiles. So that's a real fucking thing that happened.
we live in the most
Innovation.
retarded
That's
world
a real thing
ever.
that happened.
Holy
I mean,
shit.
What was it that there was some hedge fund that outperformed the market, one of the few, and it's because it was an ESG fund that invested in like ExxonMobil and Raytheon and Boeing and all these other companies.
all these oil and gas companies.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and oil and gas has been crushing it, right? It was funny. I always got signal from Steve, from my boss, right? He would, talk about the oil and gas industry, and him and I would just bullshit about stuff, and I would get these ideas from him, and then I'd go do all this research, and like everything he was saying, I was like, yeah, there's like everything's lining up that energy is about to like go through the roof, right? Without even considering a Russia-Ukraine kind of a situation. Energy, I mean, this energy crisis was happening with or without Russia-Ukraine. Like that's important. That's an important distinction because politically,
The same is true with inflation.
Yeah, but
right? all of these things were already
we're gonna
at a
hear,
breaking
though.
point, which makes you wonder, the convenient
convenience
timing.
of both COVID
I'm not-
and this.
Chevy, keep
Hey,
pulling
hey.
that thread. Keep pulling that thread. I know you got.
I mean, but like seriously, this was coming anyway, and all we're going to hear for the next 6 months is about how this is Putin's energy crisis, right? He caused it without him.
It's Putin's price hike, Adam.
Putin's price hike. I'm sorry.
We already have a meme.
We already have the meme. Right. That's all we're going to hear. But this is important. That this was coming anyway, and I like in passing told my brother, I was like, yeah, I'm buying like 100 shares of like Antero Resources. It's a Colorado-based oil and gas producer. Focuses on natural gas, which I'm a bull on natural gas because I think natural gas hasn't been properly priced. A lot of it because it's stranded and difficult to bring to market. No longer the case. And my brother's like, thanks me every week. Like, dude, thank you so much for that because he bought some Antero Resources and they were like up like 200% in the last since 2021, right? Just a small amount of any kind of investment in oil and gas. All of a sudden, these guys
Does he own
run with it.
Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, he's a huge bull.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
No, he was actually one of the few people I've ever seen that like no interest in shitcoins.
Nice.
Zero.
Well,
Like
he owns that stock.
It just did, of course. Yeah. No, some equity shitcoins. They're a little different breed of shitcoin. Right. I think that it's okay to want to own. Like I want to own Upstream Data. Right. But I mean any equity shitcoin. But like I would want to own. Some of Cathedral, like, fuck yeah.
Well, you can buy it.
I would
publicly.
never. I don't want to own stocks that don't have a Bitcoin balance sheet.
Marty's
I don't know if
next
I'm allowed to solicit investment.
He's
so
not.
I'm not going to say
You're
anything.
absolutely not allowed to solicit investment.
I don't know if I'm not allowed.
I mean, I think in a post-Bitcoin world, there will be equity that outperforms Bitcoin. I just think.
I think
Absolutely.
I think there's equity that has outperformed Bitcoin probably even in the Bitcoin space.
Just
Potentially.
very
Upstream Data has
few.
done super well. Like in terms of growth, like Steve's kicked ass at building
very few.
Yeah, very few. I'd say it's tough. A big part of that is a Bitcoin treasury, right? So when Bitcoin goes
Right.
through the roof, you're winning
It's
too.
like Blockstream's valued
right?
at like $4 billion, and I'm pretty sure it's mostly the Bitcoin they're holding.
Yeah, that they bought in like
It should
2012.
be. Yeah, and I think it
But
should be, right? But if you tactfully sell, you might even be able to like hedge your bet, a little bit against
Yeah.
Bitcoin, right?
That's the one
Mike.
The one counter argument to investing in Bitcoin that I heard from the guy who is the CEO at a startup that I worked at when we were talking about it back in like 2017, and he said, I invest in productive capital. I do, I want to put my money into humans and their ingenuity doing really, inventive things and finding new opportunities. And there's certainly an argument to be made there, right? There's always going to be companies that are doing things that are of value and, have consistent output, and you've got great leadership that's able to move that in the right direction for a long period of time.
The difference is
Counterparty risk.
You have counterparty risk, but I think most people agree with that. The thing is right now where Bitcoin is in the adoption cycle. Like the way I look at Bitcoin in terms of future potential purchasing power or returns on your Bitcoin is it's just straight up adoption. It's straight up adoption. As more people adopt it, the purchasing power should increase.
Yeah.
It's a scarce asset. As more people adopt it, it should go up. And where we are right now is, maybe there's 50 million Bitcoiners. I know a lot of people like to say 100 million Bitcoiners.
Doesn't seem likely.
I think it's probably lower than that. But regardless, there's like 8 billion people on the planet. So we're just so early in the adoption curve that it's going to be, you have to run a really tight fucking business to do better than Bitcoin.
I agree with that.
But as the adoption continues, it should, Bitcoin should kind of stabilize, still increase in purchasing power over time, because even if no one else adopts it, the people that currently have it are going to keep accumulating more. But it should stabilize off, and at that point,
correct,
you will see a lot more businesses outperform Bitcoin, but you will still see way fewer successful businesses than you see today, because today we're measuring them off of broken money. Right, so there's nuance there.
Yeah, and I was talking in the context of a post hyper Bitcoinized world.
Yeah, in a post hyper Bitcoinized world, they're clearly. I mean, like people will still own real estate, like people will still own businesses, they'll own small businesses or whatever. But the calculation, first of all, you won't have easy access to capital like you do today. You won't be able to just like go get like a fucking super cheap loan. You won't have like.
You mean like big institutions won't, larger institutions, even larger businesses.
Yeah, I think the cost of capital will be a real cost. There'll be a real cost of capital instead
and we
of
get rid of all
these
these stupid zombie companies.
Well, if you have
what is it, like 25% of publicly traded companies?
Look at Uber. He was talking about Uber, the Uber driver or whatever. They still have never made any money.
No,
they've scaled, but they just keep losing more money.
I think Amazon
scaled their losses.
But I mean, and that's part of Keynesianism. That's part of this modern monetary theory and the benefits to that are you can get shit done. I mean, if you have a money printer and you have this, you can just turn paper into something that people will literally work their ass off if you give them enough of it. Like you can get shit done. You can get satellites into space and do really crazy shit because you can command fields of so long as they believe in that money. The downside of Keynesianism, right? While the benefit might be we probably wouldn't have same day prime shipping if we weren't under a modern monetary standard, because Amazon was the same kind of deal. They were a zombie company for like 10 years and then here they are.
Thank God for AWS.
Well, AWS,
but they weren't really losing money as much as they were just reinvesting it in themselves.
Yeah,
well, no, they've never made money on the.
They were not profiting on the year. They were they had to borrow more to pay back their previous borrowings, right? And so
their money all comes from AWS.
Sounds like a Ponzi.
Their other stuff is not profitable.
Sounds like a publicly traded company.
That's actually smart. They subsidize it with something that's very high margin.
Exactly,
and they're able to drive their.
Well, this is one of the arguments.
But the downside is concentration of wealth. Yeah. Right. That's the trade-off when you talk about modern monetary theory, where yes, it's true. We can have some awesome technological advances and things, and even have maybe less volatile free markets for a time period until we have a correction or a slippage event. But ultimately, you get shit done. That's what's like. You have insane technological advances under modern monetary theory because capital's fucking free.
But this is
right.
This is the counter argument that I've heard that I think is actually worth trying to dig into. Is in a hard money standard, in a deflationary money economy, cost of capital goes up. The amount of money that is available to kind of put around into the system in order to invest in innovation and new opportunities is much tighter. And does that stifle the speed at which society innovates and grows and expands?
Well, I don't think in the digital age, because building software is relatively free, right?
Yeah, but there's still a cost incurred.
Definitely.
There's a human cost in building out code and...
Yeah. But it's relatively low compared to the...
Yeah, it's kind of a joke. It's
like manual world.
And it's margin, and it's, infinitely applicable, right? The software for such a low marginal cost. But I get your point, though, right? What I think is this is...
Like, I'm a believer in, like, we've had all this innovation despite the Keynesian system. Like, I think it would have happened anyway, just because software.
No, I think it would have happened anyway. I'm saying it certainly expedites the process.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think we may have an Amazon-like company, but maybe it took 40 more years. Right. They actually had to like take their time in growing. Right. A lot of what's funny at Upstream, is a lot of companies out there they spend money they don't have. Like they spend money with like the plan to borrow in 6 months and plan to go raise capital, sell a new story. Right. And then they can get people excited again and wait for the next bear market or whatever. And we're lean. Like we have to make the money that we're gonna spend on the month.
Right.
And so
good old fashioned bootstrap business.
we're bootstrapped. No, seriously.
Yeah.
That's just how we run, right? We have cash flow. We build physical products, and we have to be moving them. And so I think more companies going back to that again. It just the microeconomic behavior becomes so drastically different. The macroeconomic environment is gonna be tough to look to know what it looks like. It's gonna be tough to speculate on what kind of a world that looks like, because we've never seen anything like it. We just keep accelerating with to more and more and higher time preference, right? Where it's like literally I was looking on Amazon, and like I'm pretty sure you can buy one of those companies that just like sends you a box of like socks and underwear every month, and then they just like have you send it back, and they like do so, and then they send you another one like every month, so you like never have to do your underwear laundry. You just like
Ew.
but think, you're like seriously outsourcing your laundry to a company like all over the place, like a company maybe halfway across the world. Yeah, seriously, it's like you throw your stuff in there, and they send you the new stuff. It's like,
Are
what?
you using this?
No. I mean, but maybe it started making me think like
they take your underwear, they wash it, and they send it to somebody else.
Honestly,
I mean,
it's the used clothing market, I guess. I don't know.
Is there a shit stain fee?
I would imagine it's an upcharge, or they've got really good washers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it for dresses, like
Rent the Runway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes more sense than underwear. Underwear is a little bit.
Yeah, this is
More
like
Because also dresses are really expensive. You only wear them to like one special occasion or something.
Yeah.
how would you
Like
know this?
underwear is like a
How are
daily
you so
driver.
fluent in dress etiquette?
Because I have a wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rent the Runway was a huge part of
She
our wedding
uses-
season life.
My wife uses a competitor to rent the
Rent the
runway,
Runway.
and it actually makes a lot of sense because you get like these super nice dresses. It's relatively cheap. You wear it once to someone's wedding, and then you send it back.
No, yeah, to only wear
And-
to buy like a $800 dress or any piece of clothing to wear for
But
one
instead,
event.
pay
is-
like $50 for the month. You get 4 dresses. You wear them to 4 events. You send it back. Boom, done.
I love
Yeah.
we spent like the first hour going hardcore on hydrocarbons and mining, and now we're talking about dresses. Like you,
Hey, this show has breadth. Okay.
we are deep and wide. Okay.
This has been fun. Fuck.
How long have you been in Austin?
Almost a year. Coming up on a year.
Almost a year now. So
11.
you came here right about the Chexit of ASICs, the China exit of Hash
Right
Rate?
on the back end of it.
Back end of it.
Yeah. I came here in October of last year. Chexit.
gotta be-
June, July.
It's gotta be exciting to be.
Can't believe that was just last year.
I know time is distorted. Certainly, like the
Bitcoin time, like both goes really quickly and both really, really
Yep.
slowly.
Yeah.
I've been experiencing that phenomenon also.
Right. We've been hyper focused on mining and the economic impacts of Bitcoin for most of the show. This is supposed to be a weekly topical show. Is there anything?
We were talking about Tornado Cash a little bit, which
Yeah.
is good.
to touch on that just a little bit more, I forgot to mention this, but in terms of how likely it is for that to be an issue on the Bitcoin protocol, I think Tornado Cash was an easy target because they had like
Just a single contract address.
yeah,
It's
like-
super easy. They just updated a blog post.
a very easy. It's very easy to be able to
They literally
tell
did
all
that.
of these
That's literally,
regulated exchanges, like, "Hey, just stop anything from here." Right.
Yeah.
Whereas trying to tell Coinbase to block Whirlpool, like, you can't do
Well,
that
we
in
saw this-
a deterministic way.
So we kind of
No.
saw this during like the Wasabi debate of like 2 years ago because they had, or however, I don't even know how many years anymore, because they had that fixed fee address. Like every Wasabi transaction went to the fixed fee address, and their argument was like, oh well, it's easy to determine, which transactions have 100 input coin joins, and like yeah, that's true, but there's something to be said about just not making enforcement easy, right? Like
agree
not
with that.
making like, oh, we'll just put this fee address. And that's what was happening. Like there was that fee address was being blacklisted by like chain surveillance firms, by chain analysis, elliptic, whatnot. And like when the exchanges would see it, they would just be like, oh, well, has it interacted with this static reused fee address? And if it has,
It's easy
flag
to
it.
code in and just
Boom, done.
Done. Yeah.
Right, but I think that we overestimate how fluent and how precise, and I think it's severely lacking precision, this whole chain analysis idea is, right? I mean, I'm no mathematician, but statistical, arbitration to where what's the difference in telling between, if I sent Marty $50 because we went out to lunch or something, and he keeps that in like a cold wallet for 5 years, or a cold UTXO for 5 years, like it's likely chain analysis is going to think it's mine. Right, that I like took some Bitcoin, I like sent it to myself to store.
Well, that's the whole
right, and so like there's
the whole
this,
game is a probability game of
That's what I
determining
mean.
when ownership changes.
Well, and that, but,
right, because you can send it to yourself. So it's like, okay, when does ownership change? And it's all a probability game of determining ownership change.
And I think that determination is kind of horse shit. Like what we,
Right, it's
like
mostly
the idea
horseshit.
the idea that they have is they're like, oh well, if you bought it on Coinbase, like they can track it all the way. And I'm like, maybe I think they can track, one hop, maybe 2 hops,
Well,
but at some point, it's
what makes it
the probability
dangerous
is minimal.
What makes it dangerous is 99% of newcomers coming in through KYC services, that their addresses are tied to their identities, and most services that Bitcoiners interact with are KYC services that tie you to the identity. So they mix that data in with the other data to determine shit, and like that increases
even
their
have an address.
probability.
Right, but
What?
If they even have an address.
right, like,
Yeah.
Right? Because
but-
plenty of them are just, leaving it sitting in Coinbase
Oh yeah,
as
no,
an IOU.
most
Right,
of
and
them,
the
I mean,
custodians are obviously, you have no.
This is a good,
Well, and they're-
no
and they're-
privacy.
they're
a good
reporting
time to
their
plug that we're draining the exchanges.
yeah, we should.
Promo running until September 8th.
What is that, Unchained promo?
Yeah, drain the exchanges.
Drain the exchanges?
Drain the exchanges.
Or draining the
You know better than I
exchanges?
do.
It's drain the exchanges.
Drain the exchanges.
That's a really long promo code.
No, that's the hashtag. Promo
Oh.
code TFTC.
Ah, that's much easier.
I mean,
Mid roll.
mid-roll.
It's like 2 hours in.
Such a
How long have we
disjointed
been here?
Mid-roll. I was gonna say that's mid-roll. We're gonna be till 9. Yeah.
But that's the issue. The issue is the KYC has made it
Right, but like for
significantly
example,
worse.
I want to send, we're Bitcoiners. We go out to lunch, and I'm gonna pay Marty back. I might go to Strike, buy $50 worth, and just shoot it to him. Right. So now that
Right.
definitely looks like looks like that. And so
But then it looks like you sent it to yourself.
Yes.
exactly.
Until then Marty doesn't practice coin control and then merges it with funds that are attached to his identity, and then we know ownership.
Why are you
changed.
assuming I don't use coin control?
No, Marty, I know you use coin
Wait, but
control,
wouldn't
I'm
that-
saying
wouldn't
I'm
that
saying the
pose doubt?
royal Marty. You
But wouldn't
know?
that kind of like cast doubt on their understanding of what's going on, because they wouldn't know immediately that it was me to him, right? Like they might think that there's issue here, right? Like, okay, yes, this was a KYC.
Well, first of all, are you paying him with Lightning or are you paying him on chain?
exactly, right? Like, that's
Well, so if you pay him on Lightning, what did he put in the memo? Did he put
No memo.
the
Adam
beers?
dinner or whatever?
who puts legitimate memos? I always put like stuff that would be hilarious if it ever came up in court.
Taliban guns.
I mean,
That will
now your
definitely
strike
come up in
account
court.
is now your strike account is
Yeah.
frozen.
No, I think it's more fun, like pallet of Mentos.
But like that's another thing. I mean, Venmo ran into this
I just
problem
really want
where
fresh
like
breath, kind of a
people started getting banned for like putting the Iranian flag. in
They
just
still
as a
get
joke.
banned.
But like, yeah, what if I create an invoice? It's like Taliban guns.
Then he gets banned from strike.
It gets paid.
Then Adam gets banned from strike.
But like then they come to me. I was like, I didn't sell Taliban guns. We just had a
Well,
joke
they don't
about
know
it.
it's you. They just know he sent the Taliban guns or whatever.
The thing I find so frustrating is that I understand the desire from the government and the need for the services, the on-ramp services, to want to capture information about the individuals that are using their service. Like, it's annoying as fuck. It's an obligation that I wish wasn't there, but it's there, right? And what I think, it's obvious that there are opportunities to be able to take advantage of services like Azteco or like, God forbid, a Bitcoin ATM, which, you're paying a massive premium, but there is a trade-off involved. Like, you have to recognize that if you're giving up some of your personal information and associating that with the money that you want to hold on to, that there's going to be a deterministic link between you as an individual and those UTXOs.
Yeah, that's why home mining is so awesome.
Yeah,
right. Because at the end of the day, if you want to have if you want to be able to buy Bitcoin privately, right, in a way that's relatively easy, right, relatively pragmatic, buying from a friend, maybe, right, like somebody who has Bitcoin they're willing to sell you at cost, and then they just go buy and replenish or something. That's one way, but they're probably going to charge you a premium. Or you can use like some type of Aztec or something, and there's always a premium. Or you can mine, which there's a upfront premium of you got to deal with this hardware and figure out how to electrify it.
And for a lot of people, based on their power rate, there's probably a premium there too.
Well,
I would argue that it's worth it.
I'd say that goes to viability, right? Like at some point, that's a premium to some degree too, right?
Also, there's CapEx that you need to take into consideration.
But that's where I'm saying, like, if you're not,
people wanting to dump
there's
up for
CapEx
an
and
S19.
I think most people.
Really, in other words, it's in my mind, it's tough to justify spending money on an ASIC and then going and mining at a loss.
I gotta pee. I'll be right back.
Yeah, like that's such a premium that I think someone would sooner just go find a friend or use like an Azteco, right? Rather than buy an ASIC and mine at 20 cents per kilowatt hour. That's going to be such a premium that unless it was last year, then I would tell people, they were like, yeah, I've got 18-cent power. I'm like, listen, I'm not telling you to go mine Bitcoin. But for like 4 months and currently you'd be profitable. Like we were up to like 38 cent.
Well, I mean, I think there's a strong argument. I think there's a strong argument that small home miners that don't have that much hash can mine at a loss.
Yeah, please, if you're listening to this, do not go. If you have 20-cent power or something, do not go mine Bitcoin. Like I do not recommend it. You're not fit. to compete.
But I mean, even if.
But looking at it as a means by which to store, looking at it as a means by which to store your wealth in Bitcoin, an immutable means by which to store your wealth in Bitcoin, right? Like, an exchange is not an immutable means to get your hands on Bitcoin. Mining is. Like, nobody can really stop you from trying to, from guessing certain hash functions and attempting to solve the next block. I don't think anybody can truly stop you from doing that, at least not yet. So it's immutable, and I like the fact that if I have a tool that's, say tomorrow they come out and say you can't buy on exchanges anymore, or if you do, you can't withdraw to a wallet without giving us, a signature saying that, yes, this is my wallet, and, certifying that I'm in possession of this or some shit. How much does an ASIC become?
That's what I'm saying.
Does it become worth more or worth less?
I think there's a strong argument that in, like the under 20% premium area, it could be well worth it to a home miner. And personally, that is my perspective as well.
Yeah, I'd say maybe
I'm willing to mine for a loss.
I'm certainly willing to break even. I don't even know if it's mine at a loss. I'm willing to turn my ASICs off for a little while.
Mining is a game of variables, right? So it's, you don't necessarily go into it, that's 100% going to be a loss, right? But the possibility of it being a loss can be there. And a home miner can weather that storm to a degree because ultimately they're just trying to accumulate Bitcoin. And if they pay the thing is, when I bought my first Bitcoin, I paid a 30% fee on that shit. It took 5 days for me to receive it. It was one of the single best purchases I've ever made in my life, right? It's because Bitcoin has such an astronomical upside that it's such a special money that if there's a hit, I think home miners can go negative harder than like a business.
Well, they're way more flexible, right? Like I said, I mean, because I didn't finance my operation to some degree where if I have this much downtime, I'm screwed, right? We have to declare bankruptcy. I'm not going to meet my obligations.
You're paying all this shit,
right? And so I get to that break-even point where all of a sudden my ASICs aren't making enough to cover the power costs. I can just flip the ASICs off, and I'm not dying inside. It's not gonna, and then 40 days later, all of a sudden hash price is back up to 13 cents, and flip them back on. I look at a Bitcoin miner and certainly getting access to what I would call competitive or economic energy, not necessarily in the oil field, but economic energy. It's a means by which to hedge Bitcoin running away from me, right? Getting too high in price to where I can't buy very much of it. With an ASIC, I hedge that bet because competition can't go up the way price can go up. It just can't anymore.
It just doesn't scale that way.
We're not there anymore because we're not going to see those increases in the computational efficiency, right? The X Pro is only 15-20%.
Like the first ASIC that got invented, just obsolete everybody.
Oh, well, it was it didn't matter what your power was, right? The first decade of mining, doesn't fucking matter. You just have to have the latest and greatest hardware.
Right, if your hardware was over a year old, you're just
that was an 10-year phenomenon. from here on out in Bitcoin mining, it's going to be all about your marginal economic power cost and your time preference, right? And your kind of tolerance for this risk and your time horizon. Home miners, God, they're well positioned. A lot of them. I mean, farmers out in Kentucky, anybody in kind of the flyover country. There's so much opportunity out there, and it just becomes a competitive advantage that they then begin to leverage to become more efficient at deploying and earning capital.
Yeah, and what will be interesting to see too, back from my pee break, is
Was it good?
Welcome back, Marty.
Yeah,
it was
welcome
a great,
back.
it was a
good to
great
have
pee
you
break.
back.
Ran into my brother in the bathroom, and I was peeing, and he hit me in the back, and I got a little pee on my pants. But
They're
That's
black.
okay.
You're fine.
Full disclosure.
Did you disclose that because your brother was already tweeting about it, or
no, he stays off of Twitter. But what I'm interested to see, if it develops, not to see, but if this does develop, where I think there's going to be a trend too, where you have the dichotomy of on-grid and off-grid. On-grid with higher electricity prices, they'll have to use the top-of-the-line machines because that's the only thing that'll be profitable for them. But I mean, it's already started. But like the streamlining of this process of having these high hashing machines start on grid and then
High efficiency.
high
basically.
efficiency
Yeah.
get start on grid and then get sort of sent to retirement off grid.
But they're kind of like, it's almost like same efficiency. I get what you're saying. We are kind of in this weird transition. Like I'd almost say M20 and M21s are becoming the new S9.
Yeah.
At least with how S9s are priced right now. If S9s were $30 a piece, it still totally makes sense to deploy them in the oil field. I think they're too expensive right now, just because the cost to ship one is like $30. So, that's definitely happening, but we're kind of getting to the point where it's like everybody's mining with the same shit. Like commoditization is truly upon us. I would call it, we're in between 20 and, the new gen miners really between 20 and 40 watt per terahash. Mm-hmm. And all that means is, if I have 40 watt per terahash machines and you've got 20 watt per terahash machines, I just need to have energy that's, half the price. And if I'm in the oil field, I probably have that, especially if I'm the producer. And so that's the last difference left. And then after this, it should gravitate upstream. If there's times of hardship where, competition is getting squeezed, Bitcoin prices down, the guys that are going to have to turn off are the guys on grid.
Yeah.
Right? Because the guys out in the oil fields, I mean, they're never going to turn off.
Well,
Like,
and
they
that's the
almost
other
don't
thing
care.
too that we haven't even broached yet. Well, we did broach it a little bit earlier. But again, off grid, especially if you're an integrated oil and gas operator, like you have supplementary revenue that could subsidize the mining.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, even if it was unprofitable to mine, but you were a long-term bull and you wanted to take the risk of mining unprofitably for an extended period of time just to get the sats so that you could take a part of the price appreciation in the future. Like
Yeah.
that exists.
Well, because what's their alternative? To flare?
Yeah.
And now shut their engine down, right? Because there's a cost to running an engine. But typically, you're right. I think they're going to be happy to keep that engine running and collect the sats because their power cost on the margin is almost nil, especially when it's associated gas, right? It's liability production. They're going to keep producing that oil whether or not the engine's running. So, and there's probably going to be a penalty on flaring, right? Likely, even in here in Texas, right? They've been talking about it for 2 decades about how there's going to be this tax on flaring since like 2004, and I think it legitimately will come now because
we already have it. It's called Bitcoin.
Well,
So not to interrupt
Right?
our
Yeah, kind of.
continued discussion of
that's
mining,
the
because I
opportunity.
realize we're
Because
we're
you're
going
losing the
that
Bitcoin if you're flaring.
No, that's the opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
So that's the certainly there's
soft incentive.
there's a stick there instead of a carrot, right? You're feeling pain if you're
Right.
flaring, but there might be even like up in Canada, there's truly monetary pain where it's effectively like a negative cost of
or in the back end.
power, or in the Bakken, yeah, like up in North Dakota, Wyoming's. Speaking of taxes, like I think maybe Texas has done this now too, but Wyoming was one of the first to say, hey, if you come to Wyoming and you mine gas or you mine Bitcoin on flare gas, we won't tax that gas revenue. Like,
I like that.
yeah, guys went fucking running to Wyoming, right? And then meanwhile, New York's like, yeah, unless you're mining with solar panels, get the fuck out. What? So like, New York's toast.
So the reason we came back to mining was talking about non-KYC Bitcoin. And I have something else that I want to add to this. So I
Yes.
want to bring it back to it for a second. And so this might be me just being like an eternal optimist, but I genuinely believe that if we break through all that chaos and we come through the other side, I see a world where KYC Bitcoin is no longer different from non-KYC Bitcoin. It is all one and the same.
Regulatory fungibility, if you will.
well, here's
just like water.
Here's the cognitive dissonance that
Matt's
blows my
favorite.
mind.
Water.
So Europe is being known as one of the most stringent penalizers of attempting to privately transact with Bitcoin, right? Like they want you to report anytime you send more than $300 or whatever it is. Like they want you to fill out a fucking form.
It was a small amount.
Right?
It was like stupid.
It's ridiculous. This is the same governmental institution that implemented GDPR standards. Like these people seemingly care about privacy, and yet
But GDPR is a horrible piece of regulation.
well, I mean, like we can disregard that for
The implementation.
now.
You separate the implementation from the
Separate
intent.
the implementation from the intent. The intent is recognizing that people deserve to have privacy on the internet. Yet, for whatever reason, they're not capable of seeing that should just as easily apply to money. And so,
Well, especially when the money is native to the internet.
right. So I think
And the ledger is native to the internet.
That's
I feel
actually
like,
a very good
I
point.
feel like
Like,
it
could
should,
you, like-
shouldn't that encapsulate?
Yeah, it
it
should.
is an exchange of information,
Well, see, that's-
and
that's-
your exchange of information should be something that you are entitled to privacy.
But that's where Bitcoin blows it all up, because what the fuck is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is not a coin. It's not a digital token.
It's information.
It's information,
Yeah.
right? So that's what's really funny is we talked about earlier, money being a language. Well, we've finally boiled down to where money has become information, right? And it's become that in a bearer asset, because up until this point, the last 50 years, while yes, money may seemingly have just been information, the shared ledgers amongst bankers and such, that's ultimately, closed information, right? So it's not
and people holding their own liabilities and
Exactly,
like building their own trust networks.
If there's not independent verifiability, then ultimately it's not a bearer asset, right? It's not money becoming information. Bitcoin was the overlap of those two. So there's an argument that any law pertaining to information ought to encapsulate Bitcoin.
And this
right?
is
'Cause that's
exactly
truly
why I
what it is.
mentioned wanting to. I want to see Tornado Cash get to the courts. I want the courts to be able to absolutely dunk on Yellen and anybody else at the Treasury Department and anyone else who was involved in writing any OFAC guidelines related to that. Like, not that
there
I
was
care.
no guidelines written. There was just Control-C, Control-V.
No shit. Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. It's just a block, like, a transaction broadcast. It's just, a block of numbers and letters, a block of characters, right? Yeah. Ones and zeros at the end of the day. And so now people, the counter argument to that is like, yeah, well, like, the proliferation of child pornography is just ones and zeros, and it's, well, you're right. This gets tough now. Right. Now we maybe do need.
Yeah,
to
but as a result, do we
differentiate
block all exchange of ones and zeros?
Exactly. Right.
That's the equivalent here.
You're right, or at least.
Yeah, and this is something we've said many times on this show in the past. Like, you have to accept that this is the reality, that people can send these ones and zeros, and instead of being lazy and trying to throw this broad brush regulation and curtailing any innovation that may come from the ability to interact in those ones and zeros, you need to be better at doing actual criminal investigations and work and policing and
imagine that technology does. If you're a regulator, and especially if you're a regulator that's looking to carry out the enforcement and enactment of justice, technology oftentimes makes your job more complicated and difficult. It does not make it easier. With every other industry, technology will make it easier. But when you're looking at regulating the ethics and morals around, and certainly when it comes to justice around, technology, it usually becomes more complicated, more nuanced, difficult to see through the right and wrong lines, more blurry. And if regulators aren't willing to address or recognize that fact, like they're not cut out for their job, which none of them hardly are, right? I mean, the only regulators that seem to have, the right attitude are the ones that literally just got done with a civil war, and they were like the generals and leaders of, like trying to be free, the Revolutionary War. They had the right ideas, but the state.
Did you just pull in
seek power.
Post-Civil War, antebellum?
Yeah, I mean,
or what's antebellum's pre-Civil War, right? What's
anti? Yeah, anti is. Now we're getting into Latin talk. Anti is before, bellum is war, before war.
I know. What's the post one?
Post bellum.
Is it just post? Did you just really bring in Civil War?
Well, no, I'm just mentioning like
regulators.
I don't think there's any such thing like seems all regulators today are just self-seeking and always looking for more power to justify the state growing, infinitely. That wasn't the case with founding fathers. They were like, they had the antithesis of that. Like, I think a good politician is like, like a freaking, Ron Paul, where constantly all he does is sit up there and bitch all day about how inadequate the government is, how much it sucks, how they shouldn't be in charge of anything, how every time they touch anything, it goes to shit. Like, that's a great politician in my mind. Like, that, at least a great American politician. It used to be. That's gotten lost in the last 25 years, maybe.
Yep.
But like, shit, that used to be. Could you imagine if somebody was out there saying, like, other than Ron Paul, saying these things? Like, I would have a hard time not, getting behind them and trying to throw them some support, because it's a breath of fresh air to say, like, I would love for a president to be like, I just want the federal government to shrink just 1% year over year, just one time. Just like, can we do that? Because we've never done it once. It's never shrunk. I don't even think it's ever shrunk like month over month. It just to edge that framework of like, they seem to have this other mentality where we've all capitulated on, the state's just going to ever, grow infinitely, and it's, we're just going to choose the lesser of two evils.
What happens
as it becomes this bigger
The human
monster.
spirit will not allow that to happen.
I hope you're right, man.
What happens when a state finally puts Bitcoin on their treasury?
Let's go
On their
Texas.
belts.
That's why I'm in Texas, baby.
I mean, I think
Like, how long does
weren't
it
you
take?
talking about the bonds or whatever, or the like state kind of
The permanent funds.
permanent funds? That's what. I thought that you were like kind of getting some traction.
Wyoming's
with those
gonna be
Wyoming,
first.
right?
I agree
Wyoming.
with that.
With Lummis
I've had
and-
conversations. Not with. I've talked with it in conversation with Cynthia, but I've had more.
Senator Lummis.
Senator Lummis, yes. I'm sorry
Thank
for
you.
disrespecting you, Senator Lummis.
No,
She's
we
going to be
did-
here this weekend.
I mean, I did just spend 20 minutes shitting on all regulators, so.
But
Well,
no,
apologies.
Lummis is post Civil War.
Oh yeah, of course.
there's people
Of course.
seriously considering it.
Antebellum.
I don't think we're anywhere close, but in terms of like putting Bitcoin on the state
Postbellum.
balance sheet, Texas is actually probably best positioned because they have the state gold vault. So they already have a precedent there.
How much gold do y'all have?
I don't know.
A vault's worth, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a gold vault.
It's right down the street from here too. I'm pretty
Have you
sure.
checked it out? Can they do tours or something?
I don't know.
Could I take a tour of your, cold card?
I'd like to audit your UTXOs, please.
I don't know. He's a citizen.
No, but like the permanent funds make perfect
Resident,
sense.
I guess.
And I have talked to an investment bank that helps underwrite muni bonds, and they're interested in this. So like the idea for the Bitcoin mining permanent fund, where if you're a state like Wyoming or Texas or North Dakota, Oklahoma, whatever, maybe Pennsylvania, that has stranded gas assets, orphan wells that are just sitting there leaking methane, and you wanted to get productive capacity out of them, you could issue a muni bond. And there's investment bankers out there who heard this idea and are running with it. You issue a muni bond, you raise the bond to get cash, you spend the cash to partner with a Bitcoin mining operator. You buy ASICs, you go, hey, here are the ASICs, operate these for us on this flared gas. You'll get your part of the RIP. The bondholders get paid back, plus the interest they were promised that's attached to the muni bond when they buy it. And then anything above that gets rolled into a permanent fund that can then fund state activities.
I mean, that's
genius.
And by the way, I think you could.
That's pretty clean.
Well,
That's super clean.
One way you could structure that on the end, on the last step of the cycle is you could then use those state services could be plugging these liability wells that are all over hundreds of thousands of wells that literally need to be plugged, and it's a taxpayer liability. It's the government's more or less responsibility to get it done. So it's a means by which to fund. I mean, that's something that somebody would base their entire campaign on as they run for, either whether it could be a city freaking, mayor or a governor.
That's why it's a meme war. We're in a meme war. This is a good idea.
So this is
we
for
just
when-
need to spread these good
this is
ideas
for when
and have
Parker-
people like
Yeah, we're gonna get Parker Lewis to run for governor, and
Mayor.
Parker's
Well, is it mayor-
better
well,
served
okay, so
in the
mayor
private
first?
sector than the public
Well,
sector.
yeah, I agree with
he's
that.
way wasted in the public sector. But he could do it like the old-fashioned way again. Just maybe 4 years or something. And he could actually get the fuck out.
But so right now, the average state is dependent on the federal government for roughly a third of their spending. Like most of their dependence on the federal government comes from a reliance on federal funds still coming to them.
Yeah, California is the worst of them all.
Right. I think it's like 45% or something.
It's insane.
But what happens when they go and start doing a permanent fund like this, or they just simply start holding Bitcoin on their treasury sheet? Like, within a halving or two, is their reliance on the federal government eliminated?
Yes, you get to turn around, give them the finger. We don't need your money.
And so then all of a sudden you have
So
more
then-
situations like
Yeah.
New Hampshire during the COVID crisis, where they basically said, everything that you're doing is ridiculous. We're giving you back your money because we don't want to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And
And
there's more opportunities for that. There's too many states that just simply cannot turn their back on the federal government because they need the money.
they're dependent on the teat.
So Texas has this gold. That's a sovereign fund, their gold vault or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they have
Is it like a state sovereign fund?
They're
Yeah.
not. Texas isn't in debt. They have a budget surplus.
I'm not sure about that, but I know
What? Okay.
they
You can hold assets.
But
and still have
Wyoming
a
is in the
deficit.
positive.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wyoming actually has like a they
I
have
thought there was
savings.
only, like-
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have. Well, they.
A sovereign wealth fund.
But that started getting drained when Biden came into office and banned new leases
Federal
on
leases.
federal
Like-
land because Wyoming's mostly federal land.
So like
I did
Norway's in the positive. Norway actually they're in a budget surplus and they have a sovereign wealth fund, and I think they own like
Yeah, but that's because they
2.5% of
nationalized.
all stocks.
That's because they nationalized their
Yeah.
oil
They nationalized
infrastructure.
industry. They nationalized their
And they
energy
also have a
production.
super high tax rate and
have
a
a s-
very low
yep.
population. There's it's like 6 million people or something like
well,
that.
this is where it comes into like
Right.
the scalability of different governance structures. Like, it
to me,
probably works
Norway
in
is like
Norway.
a localism success. Like
Yeah.
that's because it might be
kind
a
of like
big it's a big country like land area wise, but it's only 5 million people.
Yeah. And it's
It's
scalable
less
with
than
a
New York
population
City.
like that. Yeah.
It's less than New York City.
Yeah, no, way less than New York. New York City's at like 12 or I thought. Like,
Well, like the metro area is like insane. I think the
it's like-
residency is like 9 million or something.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that has to do a lot with ultimately like what Marty was saying is just kind of the scalability and then the deal breakers of certain governance structures, right? Because there's certain governance structures that like no matter where it kind of gets applied at this scale or with this issue, it just seems to never be an improvement on anarchy or chaos, right? And that's ultimately what government is for, right? It's somehow improve this thing where what if we just all lived our lives and like we organized according to what we consented to and wanted to do, and then
That'd be awesome.
I mean, wouldn't that be just? Oh no, it would. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, who would build the roads?
New Hampshire's got great roads.
You know,
I'll tell you that.
We need to eliminate property taxes.
I think there's a. I mean, there's yeah.
Sorry.
It's
Why do you say
what
that,
Do you think, like,
Jevi?
what do you guys think about Bruce Fenton's bid to become a
3, 2,
politician?
1. I actually like it. Bruce has been based as fuck.
He's been
Let's
based
He
as
is.
fuck lately. I'm kind. I mean,
He's been having a good time.
I
It's obvious.
The woke poke is one of my favorite.
know.
favorite
The,
lines that came
so-
I
out.
hope
of
he spends the
campaign.
Raven coin money well, kind of a
to,
thing, right?
to
Like,
answer your question, though, my problem with property taxes is that if you have somebody who, early on in their life, they inherit some land and they decide they want to build their own house, they want to own it outright, they want a homestead, they want to live on their land, they've got a tiny little nest egg, but they can sustain themselves. Any resources that they need, they'll go through and trade, chickens they raise or eggs or meat or whatever else they're growing with other people. And over their life, property taxes will inevitably increase on a fiat standard because that's just simply how it works.
They'll probably increase on any standard just because governments are fucking corrupt.
And so there is no way that you can live out your days without being disrupted by that pernicious
State.
property tax.
I hope.
Have you ever seen the picture of like the old farmer who's like, I built my house 50 years ago by myself?
Yep.
Yeah.
I honestly
But
think
so-
that if we move to focusing I think we're not able to eliminate taxes altogether. There's still a need for there to be a collection of resources to be able to to accomplish a shared set of desired outcomes. I think that we can massively shrink the scale and the level on which that happens, but I honestly think that the best way to target that is through sales tax.
No,
like,
I mean,
you get away from income
Consumption
tax,
tax.
you get away
We-
from property
Consumption
tax.
we
tax
can't even-
over like income and property
Yeah,
tax.
I mean, all tax is bullshit.
we can't
but-
fucking we can't even go there. We can't even go there until we have enlightenment. And you know, it made me think. It made me. It
well,
made me think. Hold on,
luckily
hold on.
we're recording this podcast. It's going to incite enlightenment throughout the world.
Exactly, and that's kind of what it comes to. You know, I think there's a little bit of this is kind of fighting back with the same tools that are used today to, you know, tell people that fossil fuels are bad and should be abolished. And that's a lot of the kind of the mainstream, not just, you know, news and information sector, but entertainment sector. Which, like, I hope Bitcoin gets to a point where, like, some really wealthy person, you know, funds a movie based upon Saifedean's The Fiat Standard. And, like, maybe it's a futuristic, you know, society where the massive arguments in the streets and the big debates are about whether or not the property tax is going to be raised from 99.4% to 99.8%. And they're like, no fucking way they're raising it to 99.8%. Right? And it's just that kind of mockery of how did we even let it get this far?
Yeah.
Because indefinitely, that's where fiat money leads. It leads to this indefinite...
Income tax started out
But
at like
this is
1%.
indefinite
1% or
centralization.
something.
But this is how I feel about when like
We
people
need to become the
say,
creatives.
you know, oh, we don't have to worry about this thing with Bitcoin because like the courts will handle it, or like our constitution protects us or stuff. Like, are you fucking like? It just doesn't happen. It just
doesn't.
hasn't happened. History hasn't shown that it's going to happen. So like, why would it be any different? With
I mean, when it
Bitcoin?
comes to social issues, and especially, I mean, the information age really heightened the intensity of things because...
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Why, like, to answer your question directly, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're
Adam.
fine.
But because of the information age, like, we have the ability to get these ideas out there in a way that never existed before.
In a way that's...
we live in the information age, and they closed like 90% of small businesses across the world last year, or 2 years ago.
Like Jevi was saying earlier, people need to get burned. People are getting burned.
well,
They're
and I
waking
don't-
up.
yeah,
The
and
woke
I don't
They
folks
are not waking up.
They're not.
I
They
don't
are not
know.
waking
I
up.
mean,
They are
I-
getting burned, and they are still just.
Some people
They
wake
might-
up as like little.
They might be
a little
waking.
bit, a
They
little
might be
bit.
waking up. They're not getting loud.
Look
yet.
at polls for confidence in government, confidence in media. They're all time lows.
Yeah,
what-
but like I said, they might be getting.
Government's still there.
They might be waking up, but they're not getting loud yet, right? They're not yelling about it. But the mockery and the kind of the education of it, right? With the information age and a heavily armed free populace, that's a tough fucking thing to
Thank God
to
we have
enslave.
Second
It's really tough to enslave the people of the United States once the information age is in retail hands. Now, maybe some would argue it becomes easier because you can manipulate that media. And
Are
you
we
can-
not slaves already?
Right. I mean,
Are we free freaks?
I think.
Do we even live in a
I-
free country, Adam?
What were we saying earlier? We're saying that this country even free. You know, I think. I mean, I'm way more free than an Uyghur Muslim in China.
I
Like,
want to be clear here that
you know,
I'm
like-
grateful for the freedoms I do have.
like no, but it's to
but
some
have fun
degree.
paying your 40% income tax and your
Oh, yeah.
whatever your property taxes are.
And that freedom is really, I mean, an armed populace is really tough. And it's not because on an individual basis necessarily, you can't go enforce things and like, take people to jail or, really encroach on their liberties. But in mass, you can't, because in mass, they begin to organize. And the second there's a shot fired back that's justified, like it gets bad real quick, right? So like the idea doesn't even want to be spoken about. People don't even want to go there because it's like so.
We just went there.
Exactly, right? Because it's so
There
horrendous.
was like a quietness that
that's what-
fell over the studio. It's like,
Exact-
did he just do that? Marty did it once before.
That's what
I
that's
was
what
like,
keeps
Marty,
us free.
don't do that.
That is what keeps us free, right? It's that optionality. That optionality to defend oneself with equal force. I mean, Joe Rogers. Hold on. Joe Rogers gave an amazing freaking.
Yeah, but Joe's a special beast.
I mean, he
you
is a
know?
special beast, right? But
Joe's an outlier.
talking about
A good outlier.
he's a great outlier. Talking about 3D printed guns, he kept repeating the phrase, "The cost of violence keeps going down," right? Which sounds like a bad thing. It's like it's getting really cheap to be violent, right? Like, well, that sounds like a bad thing, but until you understand the concept of mass violence and violence in general is a way in which to defend oneself.
Well, he should say the cost of defense is going down.
No, but he's right because
He's
at one
we're
point
talking to the best marketer in Bitcoin.
He should
here.
learn. He should learn how to meme a little bit.
well, but you're right. He's right in the sense that only the state can be violent. Then, when the cost to be violent is so insane, only the state can do it. Right? Only the state can manage it, and that's part of what they do with like I mean, I think Chris Rock had a stand up act about this where he's like, you want to do gun control, like make every bullet $5 or whatever, right? Like raise the price of a bullet to $5 and like. people aren't going to be wasting
kinda
rounds
doing
and
that
just
too.
shooting around, right? Like,
Well, and your point's related to
you make it too expensive.
what Jason Lowry talks about, where
Spook.
you're going to have. I don't disagree with that.
I mean, Adam
how
pretty much
Bitcoin
reiterated the argument.
How
so.
Bitcoin is a machine gun.
No, but like when the cost to try and attack somebody to take their money gets to be so high that you're no longer going to be able to take their money.
Well, the cost
right?
might
Like,
not be high, but again, it's back to the sheer optionality, right? Like an armed populace has the option to defend itself with equal violent force. A person with, for example, like holding Bitcoin, they have the option to tell you to go F off, pull the trigger, you'll never get into Bitcoin.
Right.
Right? So that sheer optionality is powerful, right? I say it in the oil and gas industry all the time. There's plenty of oil and gas producers out there that are benefiting from the existence of Bitcoin without ever having bought an ASIC or anything, because when they go to the table with the midstream company, or they're going to go market their gas, they have this bargaining chip where they say,
They're
hey, if you
competing
don't,
with Bitcoin.
you don't give me a good price for my gas, I'm just going to mine Bitcoin with it. I'm going to export it to Bitcoin. Fuck you.
I'll
right?
bring economic violence to your midstream.
I will bring economic violence and pain to your world.
A threat isn't worth anything unless you actually are willing to follow through with it.
Exactly. But it's certainly not nothing if you don't even have the option of it.
Right.
If you don't even have the option to say, I'm going to defend myself if you come attack me, like, who's fucking taking you seriously? Right. Same thing with, this oil and gas situation. These producers, as Marty knows, they're bullied into these, a lot of contracts. And this isn't always the case. But trust me, the midstream guys will change the contract. They'll throw the contract out. They've got like pretty much full protection.
A lot of rugging going on in the
That's
midstream.
a lot of, but that's going to change because now power shifted back to the upstream producer to say, hey, he ultimately has optionality where he exports his energy to. Just that sheer existence is a really powerful thing. It takes a long time for those ripple effects to actually, disrupt and we see change. But when we're on the ground living it, when I'm actually having these conversations, like I'm talking to the human beings who are actually having that, decision come before them, and they're actually going to go have that meeting, and they're ecstatic how they get to talk about this new magic internet money shit. Like, well, I could just go mine. I got these guys telling me that they'll come pay this much, if I let them mine Bitcoin on my well. I think I'm just going to do that. Talk to you later, and that changes the world.
How good does that feel? Like, to
I don't know.
empower people?
I've never been an energy producer, but just to tell them, it
No,
feels
like on your
amazing.
side of things,
Oh, yeah.
like seeing.
Oh, yeah,
like,
seeing guys get excited about it, like to go from skeptics of like, I think I'm getting in on the back end of a boom bust deal and I might get wrecked if I go mine Bitcoin, right? Because they don't understand it. To going from that, and then I talked to them like a year later after, they've been operating and stuff. Like, I've got this one guy, Chris Hemsworth, he's just an absolute, he's gonna be one
The
of the best. What's really funny is
This is an actor's
So it's
name,
like,
right?
no,
Thor?
Yeah, he's a customer of ours.
His boy Chris Hemsworth.
He's a customer of ours. He's one that has sent me a lot of videos that I've always asked him, can I throw these on Twitter and stuff of their oil and gas operation. Like he was, really skeptic. He had a lot, a ton of questions when I was first talking with them, all about, a million questions about ASICs, and then still it would always kind of come down to this, like, should I do this? The good news is they were really comfortable with engines, which is a big part of the investment. So that, kind of edges them there. But call Chris today, and he sees Bitcoin being in the oil field, indefinitely. This is a new part of upstream oil and gas production, and like he's as bullish as any of us in this room, right? And so seeing that change in somebody who, is legacy and maybe an oil and gas industry, certainly not somebody that would be likely to be a Bitcoiner or something, or likely to see the value here. I mean, oil and gas producers, it's so easy for them to see the value. It comes so quick. Like the second they run it, because they understand the work being provided, right? They know how hard it is to produce energy. They understand this concept of, you have to sacrifice, you have to input in order to get an output. Right? It's not too far of a stretch.
No, then for all like you and Unchained, you're building products. They're helping people secure their wealth.
This isn't about me.
No, it's not.
No,
about
but you guys are doing you guys are even helping oil and gas producers, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Wait, just to bring this back for a second,
The over-under in 20
Like-
years?
like
5%. 5%.
no, I think I already won that argument because he's got a 90% fucking energy mix or whatever in his personal life.
That's true. I mean,
and so he's just
lawyered that
basically, his prediction is like everyone just is fucked except for him. He's the only one that gets to mine Bitcoin. But just to bring this back for a second, the Revolutionary War in America was fought over like a 2% tax.
Yeah, on T.
The Civil War, I thought, was fought.
The Civil War as well, yes. No, the Revolutionary War was fought over like a 2% tax, right? And now we're in the information age, and I'm hearing the information age is going to change things. But it seems like people are more cucked than that.
You haven't read enough.
No,
South
they're
Park,
certainly
then.
more cucked. But they've been in this. They've been this morass. They've been hypnotized. They've been under the spell of like. Because that's the other thing too. Like we were just born into this, where like people, like woke up, and it's still like the proliferation of the internet. I don't consider like the internet to be a thing until like the mid 90s. That's like the earliest.
Yep.
So we've had.
I mean, Twitter wasn't around until 2006. So
Yeah.
like consumer internet's like 2000 plus, even 2004.
Commercial activity on the internet wasn't allowed in the U.S. until like 93 or something.
Yeah. And so we have maybe 30 years of this stuff proliferating. And 20 years before that, we were fully in the fiat system. You can argue that we've been in it since 1913, since the Federal Reserve was spun up. And so what we have is like we're in this period right now.
It's still early.
It's still early. We're still like rewiring our brains to like recognize like, oh, we were born in this historical anomaly. And humans being creatures of habit, it's like hard to break them out of that.
No, it is.
It's how it's always been.
Yeah.
And
Do you guys
I think it's how it's always been.
That's
Most
what I'm
people don't
saying. That's
realize
what
it.
you're saying.
And
Yeah.
the people plugged into the Matrix are looking at TikTok all day.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any idea how much the generations in front of us are going to envy the fact that we were alive during the first million blocks?
Are they going to envy it, or are they going to be thankful that we're here, like doing all this?
No, they're going to envy it in the same way that I kind of envy the boomers, where all they had to do was like buy a few bonds and sit on their ass for like 40 years and they became millionaires.
Truth.
You know,
Yeah.
just leverage a few real estate deals here or there, roll it over, and
buy anything.
bada bing, I'm like
Yeah, it's crazy.
on Easy Street. You
Yeah,
know?
people like 100 years from now, like, could you imagine?
Could you? Yeah, no, being alive when the block reward was like multiple coins.
Do you remember when Marty Bent said it wouldn't go over 50% energy mix?
What an idiot.
That Matt Odell is such a visionary. He knew 20 years in advance Bitcoin would be literally 1 out of every 2 watts would go to the network.
All right, hey, I'm not gonna say it's impossible.
Nothing, no.
I don't think it's that.
Nothing is impossible.
Yeah, but it's definitely not going to happen that way.
That's why you're one of my favorite people.
You are too, man. You guys are all good shit. Like this is what I really respect about most of the, I guess, the more outspoken, guys on Twitter is purely that. Like, it's a hard time to have these ideas. These ideas do not get treated typically very well. They're probably bad for our reputations. Like, like in other circles other than Bitcoin, this is like, a problem when this video gets found at your job 10 years in the future or something.
I'm unemployable.
Yeah,
Good thing I work for
exactly
Unchained.
right. It's a good thing. I found a way to contribute to a company in this space too, and for somebody who I think is pretty like-minded in that way and in this way. And so like, I can't get away from the fact that there is some outspoken revolutionary kind of aspects going on here, right? This is if you were to be asked before you understood Bitcoin, right? Try to remember your pre-Bitcoin self. I know, Matt, for you, it's probably like impossible to do. The last however
It was
many
2004.
Yeah, you were in Bitcoin like 99.
Matt is Satoshi.
I wish.
No, but what I mean is, try to imagine if somebody proposed to you that in a decade there was going to be what they claimed to be was a non-violent revolution. What would come to your mind? Like, how would you think that plays out if you had to like think like, what is a non-violent revolution?
Gandhi.
What does that look like? It looks weird, right? I mean, it's frustrating as hell.
Is there
It's-
such a thing as a nonviolent revolution?
I think we're living it. I mean, I think we are.
I don't think it's possible. I
You
think
know,
that I think that
Rob-
eventually it has to come to a head, and there's going to be there's already violent conflict happening all over the world now. There's people pushing back, protesting, rioting. Sri Lanka was out of control due to
I don't think. I mean, I'm certainly
distorted
not a
And as
utopian.
Adam said
I'm not a
earlier, the
utopian.
cost of violence is decreasing.
Well, the
Cost of
beauty
violence.
of it is like we don't have to storm the palace and like literally take like a key out of their hand.
They
like a
literally
threat
just
monitor.
stormed the
Correct.
palace, though,
Yeah, they did.
in Sri Lanka.
We don't have to here. Like, say what you want about January 6th.
I love how all of our heads went there. Though.
Like, yes, people stormed the Capitol. They were let in by FBI.
I'm aware.
They were let in by FBI agents, and they didn't know what they were doing. But like, The point is, like with Bitcoin, we just plug in an ASIC, spin up a node, interact. And
I mean, we can choose to opt out to a certain degree, but ultimately we're still beholden to many of the constraints that are put in place that we find overly burdensome.
Right, and but that's where the more opting out that takes place, the more people begin to build tools that make opting out a little easier, a little more convenient, a little more holistic.
Well,
right.
This is also a big reason why I'm really big on making connections directly with farmers. I think that decentralizing your food sources
secure the lower substrate of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Go to buginitiative.com if you want to support the cause.
Bug initiative.
No, but I mean that's been a huge part of my life over the last 2-3 years is recognizing like the first thing that.
How many freezers do you have?
I don't know if I want to disclose that on.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm,
no, you don't
I'm
have
more
to.
comfortable
Why would you
disclosing
ask
my
him
kid's
that
name than the
question?
number of chest freezers.
but like
I've been very clear about this. The correct number of chest freezers that you should own
N plus one.
N plus one.
Yeah.
However many you currently have, it should be one more.
The right number is just one more.
Correct.
Yeah, just one. No, but like maybe that back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe that nonviolent revolution. Maybe that thing's like 150 years long.
Yeah, I can see that. But I think that a big part of it is, helping more and more people recognize the value of becoming less and less reliant on centralized entities, whether it's government or food supply chains or energy or anything else, right? Like whether or not a violent uprising ends up happening or governments are overhauled any of that may or may not happen. I sometimes get flack from fiat friends of mine who see some of the erratic behavior, right? And a lot of people will think of a lot of people will look at somebody and say, "Oh, that person's a doomsday prepper. They're clearly living in fear." And my retort to that is that I'm not living in fear. I have peace of mind because I don't have to worry about if an event were to happen or not. I'm prepared. I know that I'm able to take care of myself and my family.
That's really funny you said that. You guys know Mackenzie Sigalos, the CNBC.
Yes.
And she's done. I think she's done some really great justice by
She's
certainly
awesome.
Bitcoin mining articles. I was quite impressed. Even though I'm sure she didn't get to choose some of the more
titles
the more
get chose
clickbaity
by the,
headlines.
You can't choose the titles.
Yeah,
They
can't
don't get to choose the titles.
No, she's been great, but it was funny when she first interviewed me. I think it was in Houston at one of the more early Houston Bitcoin meetups, with Parker and stuff. What she said to me was she said something like, "So are a lot of the preppers home Bitcoin miners? Like she literally thought it was like a conference of preppers. Like that's like she had." She thought prepper and like Bitcoiner kind of a thing was interchangeable. Or,
it kind of is.
And I went, well, and I was like, preppers. And I kind of laughed. And she's like, well, is that not right? I'm like, well, it's kind of right. Like we're preparing for the, the inevitable financial tyranny, monetary tyranny, and the
monetary apocalypse.
Yeah, well, not just the apocalypse. It's a daily deal. I mean, every minute, the dollar supply inflates and I'm getting robbed ultimately. And so like, we are kind of preparing, I guess, is a way to say that. It's maybe a right word, but I'm like with you. Like I don't know if everyone's building bunkers in their house, in their backyards or whatever. Like that kind of like a nuclear war prepper from the Cold War era.
But that's how they imagine it.
But this is the information age, right? What does a prepper look like in the information age? It looks more like a cypherpunk, I guess, right? Yeah. It looks more like somebody with a node and a bunch of words written down, broken up in a bunch of different places that'll only they know, and maybe a trusted ally or something, right? Like maybe that's what it looks like. Maybe that's what a nonviolent revolution looks like. Because
I was a prepper before I was a Bitcoiner.
You're not building bunkers. We're building relationships. Because that's what it's going to take.
Building Bitcoin, not bunkers.
Build Bitcoin, not bunkers.
Building in the bear market.
There's something there.
I think we need.
So truly, it is like the beef initiative. Like talking about that. Like Matt and I have talked about it the last few weeks on RHR. Like. I think it's having an impact. I mean, the amount of tweets 100%. I get of people like, "Oh, I just bought a half."
I'm literally about to buy a quarter and a half. And I was just talking with Alberta Hoddle last night. He's trying to maybe trade some beef for an ASIC. Literally, he was like, I think he was talking about a whole side for a new gen.
This is a like quasi hold myself accountable in public as well as shameless self promotion. But a major side project that I've been wanting to do and have never put the time into is I spend a lot of time cooking. I love cooking at home. I've become very good at it. And I think that a lot
I've become very good at it.
No,
Have you become quite good at it?
I put a lot of time into
Continue.
it. But one of the things that I put a lot of time and effort into is I buy large format animals, a half cow at a time, a whole cow at a time, and I work on figuring out how to make the most of every single cut. And I feel like a lot of people.
Oh, so you actually butcher it?
Not yet, but that's in the plan as well.
So you're just like standing there over a butcher, like giving him your quarterbacking. Like how's this go?
I go
the
through
cut sheet.
a custom cut sheet.
Yeah, give
and
it
I
a
talk them
chop
through it.
right there.
Yep. But what I really want to do, I think that there's a lot of people who would be open to getting a quarter or a half, but thgoing to worried that they're not going to know what to do with most of it, right? They're going to know what to do with
actually
ground
kind of one of those
beef and
people right
steaks.
now. I mean, I was telling the guy, I was like, I don't think I'm going to have any use for any organs. Like, so if you're throwing those in there, like,
Mix them up with the ground beef.
And so,
I mean, I can mix it. Yeah, I can make it, some.
So what I want to do is I want to put together a whole YouTube series that walks through the entire process of purchasing a half cow or a whole cow from the very beginning of like, this is what you're committing to, and this is what you need a chest freezer of this size for this amount, and you need to find the right farmer, and these are some of the questions you want to be asking. Now you want to talk to the butcher. This is some of the cut choices that you're going to have along the way. Great, now you've got it at home. What the fuck are you going to do, right? And then you go through a ton of different recipes for a ton of different cuts, whether it's chuck or it's arm
people have a
roast
hard
or
time.
it's bread and butter or...
I mean, people can always just get ground beef.
I'm going to hold you
though.
accountable.
Like, you can always just ground
it's
it
an
up.
invaluable resource for a lot of people. And I think getting more people comfortable and interested in getting a chest freezer and getting some fucking meat in their basement, that's a huge win for people. The vast majority of people that live in urban areas, if the supply chains are properly disrupted and the electricity goes out, most people last what? 10 days?
2 days.
Right? Not even. Like, I'm being generous, right?
Wait, hold on. Say that again. You think 2 days? Power goes out 2 days. People are lasting.
I think people have about 4 days of food at home.
I mean, what's the quote?
And they're not good.
So I'm a
Well,
weirdo.
the power
then.
goes
They're
out.
not good
You're
calories.
extra fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
The only thing standing
an
between
outlier.
peace and chaos is 9 meals.
Well, what is it in New York City?
You have 2 days of food supply at any time.
Right. A massive island like that and 2 days of food supply if everything shuts down.
Yeah.
So that's
crazy.
That's
I've always kept just a massive stock of food. Just I don't know. I mean, I spent a lot of time in South America, and I mean, we actually had it where like I actually felt hungry. We had a food delivery that didn't show up. It was like 2 days late. So like we were actually hungry, like truly out of food, and like maybe that's it. But I think maybe it's thinking about energy too. Like I always use the comparison of like a gallon of gas versus a Snickers bar, right? Like because they're the same thing, right? It's fuel input. And sometimes when you look at that, like a gallon of gas being maybe only twice the cost of a Snickers bar, that's $1.99 today. Like it's kind of hilarious when you look at the actual energy content versus these two, right? One must be subsidized or this one must be way overpriced. I don't know how somebody like has any savings if they also haven't saved a little bit in food, right? Like, I mean, I feel like, even if fiat food is the easiest to save, right? Like flour.
Can't
right?
eat your Bitcoin.
No, you cannot eat your Bitcoin. Like
having live in a Bitcoin.
I mean, 100 pounds of flour, like a little bit of yeast, water, and salt. Like you have food for a long. You're not gonna be very healthy. Hopefully you got a multivitamin in there or something. But like you're gonna be fed, and you're not gonna die.
Damn.
It's probably because most people don't know how to bake any fucking bread anymore. People don't even know how to bake a loaf of bread. That's
Where do you get the yeast?
You make it yourself.
But who's gonna build the roads, right?
I'll build the fucking roads if I have to.
I will, and I'll charge
sounds
you
like
for
a good
driving
segue.
on them. Or you can,
Segue. We're 3 hours in.
I know.
Yeah, I think. I mean,
They've had a whole fucking event next door, and then everyone left. There was,
Are they
there was
gone?
like
They're gone?
120 people
the
in
dinner's
here.
happening right now.
They had 120 people in here. We started before they started their event. They had their 120 person event. Then they socialized
Well,
afterwards, and then they left, and we're still
Not
going.
necessarily-
Parker
no,
talk.
no, I mean,
Parker talk.
I mean, their event started at like noon, but you're right. This was like their happy hour event. We crushed that
okay,
whole
fair
happy.
enough.
Yeah, they've been doing a conference since like noon
I
today.
will
Okay, so
say
it's
we
still
did have
this
one
week.
shout out this week. I couldn't connect to the BTC Pay server. It was the Greenwich, Connecticut Bitcoin meetup. They started a Telegram chat I remember this part of the shout out. t.me/203BTC
Sweet.
and at 203BTC on Twitter. Go follow them.
Oh, that's a good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well played.
And we're going to do another rabbit hole recap on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
live from BitBlock Boom. We have a telethon for Hodl Not. You can go to defendingbtc.com for more information there or to donate. And we're going to be doing that on this YouTube stream tomorrow all day.
Solid.
I'm happy that we're able to get it.
And the Bitcoin Magazine Rumble. So if you want to join us, it's going to be a fun time. We're going to be raising money for Hodl Not.
Awesome.
Yeah. Guys, this was fucking fun.
This was fun. I need some good laugh. That was great. Guys.
This was a great party rip.
Yeah.
I ninja launched this on you.
Yeah, no, it was.
We ran into you.
Literally
in the-
ninja launches on me.
You were about to go get a shower. We're like, nah, you're coming in the studio.
Matt, thank you for being so incredibly wrong about the percentage of Bitcoin use in the future. It made for quite the laughter I needed.
Look,
So,
I look forward to finding out how bearish you truly were.
It will be fun. I
I
mean,
mean-
we have Rabbit Hole Recap episode 2500, whatever.
Not 2000.
We'll look back on it. You need to fact check us.
Same time, same place, 20 years from now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
Bitcoin 200K. Parker and I talk about this. We're buying this building. So yeah, we'll still be here.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
2042.
Oh, my kid's gonna be 20. Fucking
Let's not talk about
3.
20
Holy
fucking
shit.
something.
Time flies.
Oh my god. Go have kids, freaks. You're like,
Be
gasp.
fruitful, prosper, and have babies.
No, you said name and age on this episode.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I was like 20 something.
I wasn't gonna.
Yeah, I was trying to help you out.
I think I had some Marty math there too, so you'll have
Yeah,
to
good.
figure out if that was
Marty
correct.
Matt, yeah, it's not trustworthy.
He's gonna be
Marty
16.
just going heavy on
gonna be
the
68.
self-doxing
Yeah,
today.
he's gonna be 16. Okay.
In 20 years, he's going to be 16, all right?
All right, gentlemen.
All right.
This was fucking an incredible
Thanks for having
pleasure.
us.
Yep.
Let's go have. I mean, we got a long weekend ahead of us.
Cheers to that.
Peace and love, freaks.